Hi everyone. Great to have you here at Bender. Get comfortable because today we're presenting what if Harry was trained by the portrait of Salazar Slytherin at age 5 and became the coldest Dark Lord in history. Before we start, a gentle reminder, if you love stories like this, please like and subscribe. It helps the algorithm show our videos to more people. And now, the moment you've been waiting for. Chapter 1. The Serpent's Whisper. The cupboard under the stairs was dark as always, but tonight it felt different. 5-year-old Harry Potter sat huddled on his thin mattress, knees pulled tight against his chest. Outside his door, the Dursleys' television blared with laughter from Dudley's favorite program. His cousin's birthday had been yesterday, and Harry had accidentally stepped on one of his new toys. The punishment had been swift, no dinner and locked in the cupboard. Harry's stomach growled. He hadn't eaten since breakfast, a meager portion of toast and eggs that Aunt Petunia had reluctantly served him. His fingers absently traced the rough wood grain of the cupboard wall, finding comfort in the familiar ridges and valleys. Stupid Dudley, he whispered to himself. Stupid birthday. A small spider crawled across the floor, and Harry watched it with mild interest. Spiders were his only companions here. He'd long ago learned not to be afraid of them. At least you're free to leave whenever you want, he told the spider. As if in response, the spider scurried toward a small crack near the base of the wall. Harry followed its path with his eyes until something unusual caught his attention. A faint green glow emanated from behind the loose baseboard where the spider had disappeared. Curious, Harry crawled forward on hands and knees. The green light pulsed softly, beckoning him closer. He pressed his finger against the baseboard, and to his surprise, it gave way easily, revealing a small hollow space within the wall. The source of the light was a small frame, no bigger than his hand. Harry carefully extracted it from its hiding place. It appeared to be an old painting, though unlike any he'd seen before. The frame was silver with intricate serpentine patterns that seemed to shift in the dim light. Within it was the portrait of a stern-looking man with a long beard and piercing eyes that gleamed with the same eerie green light that had drawn Harry's attention. Harry stared at the painting, fascinated by the craftsmanship. The man in the portrait wore elaborate robes of emerald and silver, and a heavy locket hung around his neck, emblazoned with an ornate S. "Hello," Harry whispered, not expecting a response. The eyes in the portrait blinked. Harry nearly dropped the frame in shock but managed to keep his grip. His heart pounded in his chest as the man in the portrait regarded him with calculated interest. "You can see me, child?" the man asked, his voice a soft, sibilant hiss. Harry's eyes widened. The portrait was speaking to him, but not in any language he recognized. Yet somehow, he understood perfectly. "Yes," Harry replied without thinking, the same strange hissing sound emanating from his own lips. "Who are you?" A slow smile spread across the man's face, revealing teeth that seemed unnaturally sharp. "Interesting. Very interesting indeed. A speaker, after all this time." The portrait's eyes narrowed. "I am Salazar Slytherin, one of the 4 founders of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. And you, child, are a Parselmouth, one who speaks the language of serpents." Harry blinked in confusion. "Magic isn't real," he said automatically, repeating Uncle Vernon's frequent declaration. Slytherin's laughter was cold and sharp. "The muggles who keep you here have filled your head with lies. You are a wizard, child. I can sense the power within you, raw and untapped. Tell me your name." "Harry. Harry Potter." The portrait's expression shifted, surprise briefly flashing across his painted features before settling into a calculating gaze. "Potter, yes, I see it now. The resemblance to that bloodline is there, though diluted. But there's something else about you, something marked." Slytherin's eyes focused on Harry's forehead, where the lightning-shaped scar stood out against his pale skin. "Show me that mark, child." Harry hesitantly brushed his unruly hair aside, revealing the scar that had been with him as long as he could remember. Aunt Petunia had told him he got it in the car crash that killed his parents, but he had always felt there was something more to it. Fascinating, Slytherin hissed, his painted eyes gleaming brighter. You carry powerful magic in that scar, Harry Potter. Dark magic. Tell me, do strange things happen around you? Things you cannot explain. Harry thought about the time his hair had grown back overnight after Aunt Petunia had cut it almost to the scalp, and how he'd somehow ended up on the school roof when Dudley and his friends were chasing him. He nodded slowly. Yes, how did you know? Because you are a wizard, child. As I was. As your parents were. My parents weren't wizards, Harry objected. They died in a car crash. Slytherin's laughter was sharper this time, almost cruel. More lies from these muggles who keep you in a cupboard like a discarded tool. Your parents, Harry Potter, were magical. They were murdered by a powerful dark wizard. And somehow, you survived, the only one ever to survive the killing curse, if I'm not mistaken. That scar is no ordinary mark. Harry's mind reeled. It was too much to take in at once, magic, his parents, the scar, but something deep inside him recognized the truth in Slytherin's words. It explained so much about his life, about the strange occurrences and the Dursleys' fear and hatred of anything abnormal. Why are you here? Harry asked finally. In my cupboard? An excellent question. My portrait has been hidden for centuries, passed from one guardian to the next. How it came to be concealed in this Muggle dwelling, I cannot say. Perhaps fate has intervened to bring us together. Slytherin's eyes gleamed with purpose. What I can tell you, Harry Potter, is that I can offer you knowledge. Power. The means to escape this, undignified existence. Harry's young heart quickened at those words. Power. Knowledge. Freedom. Everything he had secretly dreamed of during long, lonely nights in the cupboard. What would I have to do? He asked cautiously. Learn from me. Become my true heir. I can teach you magic beyond what they will show you at Hogwarts, when you eventually receive your letter. I can help you become great. Why would you help me? Slytherin's smile was calculating. Because you have potential, child. Because you speak the noble tongue of serpents. And because I have waited a very long time for an heir worthy of my legacy. From outside the cupboard, Harry heard Uncle Vernon's heavy footsteps approaching. Quickly, he tucked the portrait back into its hiding place behind the baseboard. Boy! Quit talking to yourself in there. Vernon bellowed, rapping sharply on the cupboard door. Normal people are trying to enjoy their evening. Sorry, Uncle Vernon, Harry called back meekly, his heart pounding. The footsteps retreated, and Harry let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He glanced toward the baseboard where the portrait was hidden, wondering if he had imagined the entire conversation. But then a soft green glow pulsed once from behind the wood, and he knew it had been real. We will speak again tomorrow night, came Slytherin's soft hiss. Rest now, my heir. Harry lay back on his thin mattress, his mind buzzing with questions and possibilities. For the first time in his young life, he felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest, hope. If what the portrait said was true, if he really was a wizard with powers of his own, then perhaps he wouldn't have to endure the Dursleys' cruelty forever. As he drifted off to sleep, Harry dreamed of serpents and magic and a life beyond the cupboard under the stairs. Focus, child. Feel the magic within you. It flows like blood through your veins, waiting to be directed by your will. 6-year-old Harry sat cross-legged on his mattress, eyes closed in concentration. A small feather lay on the floor in front of him, a stray from one of Aunt Petunia's decorative pillows. For weeks now, Salazar had been teaching him the fundamentals of magic, starting with the most basic exercises to sense and direct his innate power. I'm trying, Harry hissed back in frustration. It's not working. Patience, Slytherin's portrait replied. Magic responds to emotion as much as intent. Your frustration blocks the flow. Clear your mind. Feel the power gathering at your center, then direct it toward the feather. Imagine it rising. Harry took a deep breath and released it slowly, just as Salazar had taught him. He pushed away his frustration, focusing instead on the warm, tingling sensation he had begun to recognize as his magic. He imagined it collecting in his chest, then flowing down his arms to his fingertips, directed toward the feather. "Levitate," he whispered, the word coming out as a soft hiss in Parseltongue. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the feather trembled slightly, rising a few inches off the floor before floating gently back down. Harry's eyes snapped open. "I did it." "Indeed," Slytherin responded, a note of pride in his sibilant voice. "Well done, young heir. You have taken your first step into a larger world. With time and practice, you will not need to vocalize your intent. The magic will respond to your will alone." Harry beamed, reaching out to collect the feather. It had been nearly a year since he discovered Slytherin's portrait, and in that time, he had learned more than he thought possible. The stern founder had started with history, explaining about the wizarding world, Hogwarts, and Harry's own place in magical society as the boy who lived. "When I go to Hogwarts, will I be in your house?" Harry asked, twirling the feather between his fingers. "That depends on you, child. The Sorting Hat takes your preferences into account. But we have many years before that day arrives. For now, we focus on building your foundation. Your control over wandless magic at such a young age is unusual. It speaks to your potential." Harry nodded seriously. Slytherin had explained that most young wizards couldn't control their magic without a wand, and even then, not until they received formal training. That Harry could perform even simple wandless spells at 6 was, according to Salazar, a sign of exceptional power. "Tomorrow," Slytherin continued, "we will begin work on the mind arts. A wizard who cannot protect his thoughts is vulnerable to those who would exploit him. And you, Harry Potter, must learn to guard your secrets well." The portrait's gaze drifted toward the cupboard door. "Your captors approach. Hide me now. Practice levitating the feather again tonight, but be cautious. Do not let them see." Harry quickly returned the portrait to its hiding place as heavy footsteps approached. The door to the cupboard swung open, revealing Aunt Petunia's pinched face. "Get up," she snapped. "Dudley's friends are coming for tea, and I need you to weed the garden before they arrive. And don't you dare track mud into my clean house afterward." "Yes, Aunt Petunia," Harry replied, careful to keep his expression neutral despite the surge of resentment he felt. Slytherin had taught him the value of concealing his emotions, of presenting a mask to those who would use his feelings against him. As he followed his aunt into the kitchen, Harry felt the feather, hidden in his pocket. A small reminder of what he was becoming, and of the power that would, someday, free him from this place. The garden snake watched Harry with unblinking eyes as he carefully tended to the roses, removing weeds from around their bases. It was a beautiful summer day, warm sunshine bathing the immaculate lawn of number 4, Privet Drive. Harry was 7 now, taller but still thin, his messy black hair longer than Aunt Petunia preferred but not long enough to earn him another botched haircut. "Hello, friend," Harry hissed softly to the snake, glancing quickly toward the house to ensure no one was watching. "Are you hunting?" The snake, a common grass snake no longer than his forearm, tilted its head curiously. "You speak the old tongue, human child. Interesting. Yes, I hunt the mice that nest beneath the shed." Harry smiled. Since discovering his ability to speak Parseltongue with Slytherin, he had found that conversing with actual serpents came just as naturally. Over the past months, he had made friends with several of the garden snakes that occasionally visited the Dursleys' property. "I could help you find them," Harry offered. "In exchange for a small favor." "What favor does a human child seek from one such as me?" the snake asked, slithering closer. "Information. I need to know what happens in the house across the street when the woman with the gray hair visits. She speaks with my aunt often, and I think they talk about me." Mrs. Fig, the cat-loving neighbor who occasionally watched Harry when the Dursleys went out, had been visiting Aunt Petunia with increasing frequency lately. Harry had noticed the two women watching him with suspicion, particularly after the incident last month when Dudley's birthday cake had mysteriously exploded just as his cousin was about to blow out the candles. Harry hadn't meant to do it, at least, not consciously, but he knew his accidental magic was becoming stronger and more frequent. The snake considered his request. "It is not difficult. The dwelling has many small entrances. I can listen and return with what I hear. And you will show me where the mice hide?" "Yes," Harry confirmed. "Thank you, friend." As the snake slithered away toward Mrs. Fig's house, Harry returned to his weeding, a small smile playing at his lips. Slytherin had taught him the value of having eyes and ears in unexpected places. The garden snakes had become his first network of spies, bringing him information about the neighborhood and, more importantly, about what the adults said when they thought he wasn't listening. 2 hours later, having finished his chores and retreated to his cupboard, Harry sat conversing with Slytherin's portrait. The snake overheard Mrs. Fig talking to Aunt Petunia. She mentioned someone named Dumbledore who's concerned about unusual magical signatures around the house. Aunt Petunia seemed frightened. Slytherin's painted eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "Dumbledore. The current headmaster of Hogwarts, if my information is correct. A powerful wizard, and one who would take great interest in your development. This confirms my suspicion that you are being monitored, young heir." "Monitored? Why?" "Because of who you are, child. The boy who lived is not left unguarded, even among these worthless muggles. This Dumbledore has likely placed magical protections around this dwelling, and possibly means to detect powerful magic within it." Slytherin's expression grew calculating. "We must be more cautious. Your accidental magic draws attention. You must learn control above all else." Harry nodded solemnly. "What should I do?" "We will accelerate your training in occlumency, the art of shielding your mind. It will help you control your emotions, which in turn will help you control your magic. Additionally, we must find a more suitable place for you to practice, away from prying magical censors." "But I'm not allowed to leave the house except for school," Harry pointed out. Slytherin's smile was cold. "Then we shall have to create a space where you can practice undetected. The foundations of this house are old, and beneath them lie remnants of even older structures. I sense them. With the right magic, we might create a chamber, small, but sufficient for your needs." Harry's eyes widened at the prospect. A secret place, all his own, where he could practice magic freely without fear of discovery. The idea was thrilling. "Tonight, when your relatives sleep, we will begin," Slytherin decided. "For now, practice your breathing exercises. Center your mind. Control is paramount, young heir." Harry closed his eyes, focusing on his breath as Slytherin had taught him. In and out, slow and deliberate. With each exhale, he imagined his magic settling, becoming a calm pool rather than a turbulent sea. He had learned much in the 2 years since discovering Slytherin's portrait, but he knew this was only the beginning. Somewhere in the house, a door slammed, and Dudley's whining voice carried through the walls. Harry remained still, his breathing steady, his mind clear. Let them shout and stomp and throw their tantrums. One day, they would understand who he truly was. One day, they would regret every cruel word, every missed meal, every moment of fear they had instilled in him. One day, but not yet. For now, Harry Potter would wait, and learn, and grow stronger in the shadows. The small chamber beneath the Dursleys' house had been Harry's sanctuary for over a year. Located beneath the garden shed, accessible only through a narrow passage they had created with careful magical excavation, it was roughly the size of a small bedroom, larger than his cupboard, at least. The walls were packed earth, reinforced with magic that Slytherin had painstakingly taught Harry to perform. A few stolen candles provided light, and Harry had gradually furnished it with cast-offs and items, borrowed from the Dursleys or scavenged from neighborhood trash bins, a threadbare rug, a rickety chair, even a small bookshelf containing texts taken from the school library. On the far wall hung Slytherin's portrait, which Harry had moved here once the chamber was complete. It was safer this way, less chance of the Dursleys discovering it during one of their periodic inspections of his cupboard. "Your form is improving," Slytherin commented as 8-year-old Harry moved through a series of fluid positions, directing his magic to create a shimmering shield around himself. "But your right side remains vulnerable. Adjust your stance." Harry shifted his weight, feeling the flow of magic change with his movement. The shield rippled, becoming more uniform, though maintaining it still required intense concentration. "Better," Slytherin acknowledged. "Hold it for 10 more seconds, then release gradually, not all at once." Sweat beaded on Harry's forehead as he maintained the shield, counting silently. When he reached 10, he exhaled slowly, allowing the magic to dissipate in controlled waves rather than collapse suddenly. The shimmering barrier faded, and Harry dropped to a sitting position on the rug, breathing heavily. "You're developing impressive control for your age," Slytherin said. "Most wizard children require a wand to focus their magic so precisely. Your wandless abilities will give you a significant advantage when you eventually attend Hogwarts." Harry nodded, taking a moment to catch his breath. The past 3 years of training with Slytherin had transformed him. Though still small for his age, a result of the Dursleys' neglect, his body had become wiry and agile. His mind was sharper too, disciplined through rigorous practice in occlumency. He could now control his emotions well enough to prevent most accidental magic, and his deliberate spellwork was growing more precise by the day. "When will we move on to more advanced magic?" Harry asked, reaching for the water bottle he kept in the chamber. "The defensive spells are useful, but I want to learn how to fight back." Slytherin's painted eyes narrowed slightly. "Patience, young heir. A true Slytherin understands that timing is everything. You build your defenses first, your arsenal second. But yes, I believe you are ready to begin learning some offensive magic." He paused, studying Harry with that calculating gaze that had become so familiar. "Tell me, what happened at school this week? You mentioned there was an incident." Harry's expression darkened. "Dudley and his friends. They cornered me during lunch break. Called me a freak. Tried to beat me up. And..." Slytherin prompted. "I controlled my magic, like you taught me. Didn't lash out. But..." Harry hesitated. "I did something else. I looked at the biggest one, Piers Polkiss, and I pushed into his mind. Just a little. I made him think he saw a snake coming out of the drain. He screamed and ran away, and the others followed him." A slow smile spread across Slytherin's face. "Legilimency. Crude, untrained, but effective. You've been practicing without my knowledge, it seems." Harry shrugged, not entirely apologetic. "I read about it in the book you described to me. The one about mind arts that I found in the second-hand bookshop. I've been practicing on Mrs. Figg's cats." "Resourceful," Slytherin acknowledged with approval. "Though animal minds differ significantly from human ones. Still, it shows initiative. We shall incorporate proper legilimency into your training. A wizard who can influence the minds of others has a powerful advantage." Harry nodded, his green eyes bright with enthusiasm for this new direction in his studies. After years of suffering Dudley's bullying, the idea of having power over those who had tormented him was deeply satisfying. "There's something else," he said after a moment. "A man was watching the school today. Tall, with dark skin and strange robes under his coat. He was trying to look normal, but he didn't quite fit in. And he was watching me specifically during break time." Slytherin's expression grew serious. "Describe him in detail." Harry closed his eyes, recalling the memory with the precision his occlumency training had taught him. "About 6 feet tall. Bald. Dark brown skin. Severe expression. He wore a long coat that didn't quite hide the robes underneath, they looked official somehow, dark blue with silver edging. He had a strange device in his hand, like a small silver top that spun continuously. An unspeakable, Slytherin hissed, his painted face tightening with concern. From the Department of Mysteries, if my knowledge remains current. They study the most enigmatic branches of magic. That he watches you is troubling. Is he dangerous? Harry asked. Potentially. The Department of Mysteries operates independently, even from the Ministry of Magic. If they've detected your magical development. Slytherin fell silent for a moment, thinking. We must accelerate certain aspects of your training. The protective enchantments on this chamber are adequate for now, but we should strengthen them. And you must be even more careful about using magic outside this space. Harry nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. What is he looking for? Possibly anomalies in your magical signature. Untrained wizard children typically emit erratic magical energy. Yours, after years of disciplined practice, would appear unusual, controlled, focused. That might have triggered their interest. Slytherin's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Or perhaps they detected our creation of this chamber. Such magic, performed by a child, would certainly raise questions. Harry felt a chill of apprehension. He had always known that his training with Slytherin needed to remain secret, but the appearance of this mysterious observer added a new level of danger to his situation. How do I protect myself? He asked, his voice steady despite his concern. Knowledge. Vigilance. And perhaps, a distraction. Slytherin's expression shifted to one of calculation. We shall create a false trail. A series of small, apparently accidental magical outbursts, the kind expected of a wizard child your age. Nothing harmful, but noticeable enough to suggest typical untrained ability. Meanwhile, we continue your true training here, in secret. Harry considered this strategy. Like a decoy. Precisely. Let them see what they expect to see. A future Hogwarts student with occasional bursts of accidental magic, nothing more. Slytherin's painted lips curved into a cold smile. Misdirection is a powerful tool, young heir. Remember that. Harry nodded, already planning how he might stage these accidental magical incidents. Perhaps a broken window during one of Dudley's bullying episodes, or mysteriously changed hair color for a teacher who treated him unfairly. Now, Slytherin continued, let us return to your training. The shield charm was adequate, but I want you to try something more complex. A disillusionment charm, the art of blending with your surroundings. Useful for avoiding unwanted attention, magical or otherwise. Harry rose to his feet, pushing aside his concerns about the mysterious observer. For now, he would focus on his training. The more he learned, the better prepared he would be for whatever challenges lay ahead. As he began practicing the new charm under Slytherin's watchful eye, Harry felt a familiar determination settling in his chest. Let them watch. Let them wonder. They would never truly see him until he was ready to be seen. The summer heat pressed down on Privet Drive like a heavy blanket, making the air shimmer above the pavement. 9-year-old Harry wiped sweat from his forehead as he meticulously trimmed the hedge in the front garden, careful to make each cut precise. Aunt Petunia was hosting her garden club that afternoon, and everything had to be perfect. A flicker of movement caught his eye, a garden snake slithering along the base of the hedge, barely visible among the roots. Greetings, Speaker, the snake hissed softly. I bring news. Harry glanced toward the house, confirming that the Dursleys were occupied inside. What news, friend? He whispered back in Parseltongue. The Watcher has returned. He stands behind the large tree across the street. His silver device spins faster today. Harry didn't turn to look. Instead, he continued trimming the hedge, maintaining the appearance of an ordinary boy doing his chores. His network of serpent spies had been keeping track of the mysterious observer for the past year, reporting his comings and goings. The man, whom Harry had mentally nicknamed Blue Robe, appeared every few weeks, always watching from a distance, always with that strange spinning device in his hand. "Thank you," Harry replied to the snake. "Stay hidden, but keep watch. Let me know if he approaches." The snake flicked its tongue in acknowledgement before disappearing deeper into the foliage. Harry continued his work, outwardly focused on the hedge while his mind raced through possibilities. According to Slytherin, the spinning device was likely a dark detector of some kind, a magical instrument designed to sense dark or unusual magic. The fact that it was spinning more rapidly today suggested something had changed. Had his carefully constructed facade slipped? Had he unknowingly performed magic outside the safety of his hidden chamber? Or was it something else entirely? Harry completed his work on the hedge and gathered his gardening tools, finally allowing himself a casual glance across the street. Sure enough, partially concealed behind a large oak tree, stood Blue Robe. Today he wore what appeared to be normal Muggle clothing, dark trousers and a light shirt, but his stiff posture and vigilant stance marked him as out of place in the suburban setting. Following Slytherin's advice about establishing a false trail of accidental magic, Harry had staged several minor incidents over the past year, nothing harmful, but noticeable enough to register as the typical magical outbursts of a wizard child approaching Hogwarts age. If Blue Robe was as unspeakable as Slytherin suspected, these incidents should have appeared normal, unremarkable. So why was his detector spinning faster today? As Harry turned to carry the tools to the shed, he noticed something odd about the watcher. There was a tension in his posture that hadn't been there before, an alertness that went beyond mere observation. And then Harry saw it, a second figure, partially hidden behind a parked car further down the street. This one was smaller, wearing what appeared to be a hooded cloak despite the summer heat. 2 watchers. That was new. Harry carefully maintained his casual pace as he entered the garden shed, his mind racing. Once inside, he placed the tools on their designated hooks. Aunt Petunia insisted on precise organization, and then pressed his ear to the thin wooden wall, listening. Dudley's voice carried from inside the house, whining about being bored. Uncle Vernon's deeper tones responded, suggesting they go for ice cream. Perfect. Harry waited until he heard the front door open and close, followed by the sound of the car starting. Through a crack in the shed door, he watched as the Dursley men drove away, leaving Aunt Petunia alone in the house, presumably preparing for her garden club meeting. This was his chance. Ensuring no one was watching, Harry slipped to the back of the shed and carefully moved aside the false panel he had installed to conceal the entrance to his underground chamber. The narrow passage beyond was dark and cool, a welcome relief from the summer heat. He descended quickly, pulling the panel back into place above him. The chamber had evolved significantly since its creation 2 years ago. Slytherin had guided Harry through a series of enchantments to expand the space, which was now roughly 15 feet square. The packed earth walls had been reinforced with magic, and Harry had installed proper lighting, small globes of magical light that hovered near the ceiling, activated by a simple wandless charm. The furnishings remained sparse but functional, a desk and chair salvaged from neighborhood cast-offs, bookshelves holding texts on various magical subjects, and a practice area marked by a circular rug at the center of the room. Slytherin's portrait hung in a position of honor on the far wall. As Harry entered, the painted eyes followed his movement. "Something's happened," Harry said without preamble. "Blue Robe is back, but his detector is spinning faster, and there's a second watcher with him." Slytherin's expression grew serious. "Describe this second observer." "Smaller. Wearing a hooded cloak. I couldn't see their face." Harry paced the chamber, his mind working through the implications. They seemed to be working together, positioned to watch the house from different angles. "This is concerning," Slytherin acknowledged. "If the Department of Mysteries has increased its surveillance, they must have detected something significant. Have you performed any magic outside this chamber recently?" Harry shook his head. "Not deliberately. I've maintained the false trail as you suggested, the last incident was 2 weeks ago when I made Aunt Petunia's prized roses change color temporarily during her garden club visit. But nothing since then. Then perhaps. Slytherin's painted eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Perhaps it is not what you have done, but what you are about to do. What do you mean? Your 10th birthday approaches, does it not? Harry nodded. Next month. July 31st. A significant age in magical development. The core stabilizes, raw power increases. Some magical detection systems might anticipate this change. Slytherin's expression grew calculating. Or perhaps there is more to your particular case than typical magical maturation. The circumstances of your survival as an infant were unprecedented. The scar you bear is no ordinary mark. Harry's hand moved unconsciously to his forehead, tracing the lightning-shaped scar that had been with him as long as he could remember. Over the years, Slytherin had theorized that the scar contained powerful dark magic, a remnant of the curse that had failed to kill him as a baby. On rare occasions, usually during intense magical practice, Harry had felt the scar burn, as though the magic within it were responding to his own. What should I do? Harry asked. For now, maintain your facade. Continue to appear as nothing more than a neglected child with occasional bursts of accidental magic. But we must accelerate certain aspects of your training. Slytherin's voice took on a more urgent tone. The ritual we discussed, I believe it is time. Harry's pulse quickened. The ritual Slytherin referred to was something they had discussed only in theory, a complex piece of magic designed to bind a mentor's knowledge directly to a student's mind, bypassing years of conventional instruction. According to Slytherin, it had been used in ancient times by the greatest magical families to ensure their heirs received their ancestral knowledge, even if the elders died before training was complete. But you said it was dangerous, Harry pointed out. That it required blood magic. All power comes with risk, young heir. Yes, it requires blood, freely given, as the conduit for the knowledge transfer. But the potential benefits outweigh the dangers, especially now that your magical core approaches maturity. Slytherin's painted eyes gleamed with intensity. With the ritual, I can impart generations of magical knowledge directly to your mind. Spells, potions, magical theory that has been lost to the modern wizarding world. You would still need to practice, of course, to develop the skill to use this knowledge effectively. But the learning itself would be expedited. Harry considered this carefully. Blood magic was considered dark by modern wizarding standards, Slytherin had explained that much. But then, much of what he had already learned would likely be frowned upon at Hogwarts. The mind arts, in particular, were rarely taught to students so young. When could we perform this ritual? He asked finally. On the night of your 10th birthday. The transition point between childhood and the approach to magical maturity holds power of its own. And if these watchers can indeed sense the coming change in your magical signature, we might use their expectations to our advantage. Slytherin's expression was shrewd. They anticipate a surge in your magical energy. We shall give them exactly that, but channel it through the ritual, where it will appear as nothing more than the natural maturation they expect. It was a calculated risk, but one that appealed to Harry's growing strategic mindset. If the Watchers were going to be paying special attention to him anyway, why not use that expectation as cover for something much more significant? What will I need for the ritual? He asked, his decision made. Specific ingredients, which we shall have to acquire carefully. A proper silver knife for the blood component. And most importantly, absolute privacy and security. The chamber must be warded more thoroughly than ever before. Harry nodded, already mentally cataloguing what he would need and how he might obtain each item. The prospect of the ritual filled him with both excitement and apprehension. If successful, it would give him access to magical knowledge far beyond his years, knowledge that had been lost to the wizarding world for centuries. 1 month, he said, more to himself than to Slytherin. 1 month to prepare. Slytherin's painted lips curved into a satisfied smile. Indeed, young heir. And after that, the true work begins. The night of Harry's 10th birthday arrived hot and still, the air heavy with the promise of a summer storm. The Dursleys had paid no attention to the date. As usual, there had been no card, no cake, not even a passing acknowledgement that today marked a decade since Harry had been left on their doorstep. That suited Harry perfectly. Their neglect meant they had retreated to their respective rooms early, leaving him free to slip away to his hidden chamber once darkness fell. Everything was prepared. Over the past month, Harry had carefully gathered the components needed for the ritual, using a combination of his meager pocket money, strategic borrowing from the Dursleys, and trade with the local serpents who brought him items from gardens and fields beyond Privet Drive. The chamber had been meticulously warded according to Slytherin's instructions, layers of protective magic designed to conceal the powerful energies the ritual would release. At the center of the room, Harry had drawn an intricate circle in silver dust, surrounded by 5 black candles positioned at precise intervals. Slytherin's portrait hung directly opposite the entrance, overseeing the preparations with critical attention to detail. "Is everything ready?" Harry asked, placing the final component, a small vial of morning dew collected from lily petals, at the edge of the circle. "Almost," Slytherin replied. "The timing must be exact. We begin at the stroke of midnight, the precise moment you enter your 10th year." Harry glanced at the small clock he had salvaged from Dudley's discarded toys. 11:45. 15 minutes remaining. "Are you certain the wards will hold?" he asked, thinking of the watchers who had maintained their vigil with increasing frequency over the past month. Just that afternoon, he had spotted Blue Robe conferring with the smaller hooded figure near the park, their expressions serious. "The wards are as strong as your magic can make them," Slytherin assured him. "And the natural surge of power associated with your birthday will help mask the ritual's energy. Still, we must work quickly and precisely. Once we begin, there can be no hesitation, no error." Harry nodded, feeling a mix of anticipation and nervous energy. He had practiced the ritual components repeatedly over the past weeks, memorizing the complex incantations and precise movements required. Yet he knew that theory and practice often diverged, especially with magic this advanced. "Will it hurt?" he asked, voicing a concern he had kept to himself until now. Slytherin's painted expression remained impassive. "Yes. The blood bond creates a channel between minds, between my knowledge and your consciousness. Such connections are not formed without cost. But pain is temporary, knowledge eternal. You must decide if the price is worth the gain." Harry thought about the years he had spent in the cupboard under the stairs, the countless small humiliations and cruelties inflicted by the Dursleys, the knowledge that somewhere in the wizarding world, a Dark Lord's followers might still seek to finish what their master had begun. Pain he understood. Pain he could endure. "I'm ready," he said with quiet determination. As the minutes ticked down toward midnight, Harry removed his oversized hand-me-down shirt, standing bare-chested within the silver circle. In his right hand, he held a small silver knife, its blade gleaming in the candlelight. The other ritual components were arranged precisely around the circle's edge: the vial of dew, a small bundle of herbs bound with a strand of Harry's own hair, a piece of parchment inscribed with ancient runes, and a shallow silver dish to collect the blood. 3 minutes remaining, Slytherin announced. "Center yourself. Clear your mind as I have taught you." Harry closed his eyes, focusing on his breathing. In and out. Slow and steady. He felt the familiar sensation of his magic swirling within him, stronger tonight than ever before, whether from the approaching ritual or the natural surge of his 10th birthday, he couldn't tell. The clock ticked down. 1 minute. 30 seconds. 10. "Begin," Slytherin commanded as the clock struck midnight. Harry opened his eyes, raising the silver knife. "With blood freely given, I open the path between master and heir," he intoned in Parseltongue, the sibilant words echoing strangely in the chamber. He drew the blade across his left palm, deep enough to draw blood but not so deep as to cause lasting harm. Red droplets fell into the silver dish, each one hissing softly as it made contact with the metal. With mind opened wide, I seek the knowledge of my ancestors, Harry continued, picking up the parchment with his bleeding hand, allowing the blood to stain the runes inscribed there. The marks began to glow with an eerie green light, similar to the glow that emanated from Slytherin's portrait. The chamber grew colder suddenly, the candle flames stretching tall and thin. Harry felt a pressure building in his head, behind his eyes, but he forced himself to continue, dropping the bloodied parchment into the dish. With magic as my conduit, I claim my birthright as heir to Salazar Slytherin, he declared, his voice growing stronger despite the increasing pain. He added the vial of dew to the dish, followed by the bundle of herbs. The mixture bubbled and hissed, emitting a silver vapor that rose in spiraling tendrils around Harry's body. In his portrait, Slytherin's painted form seemed to become more vibrant, more present, as though the boundary between paint and reality was thinning. With wisdom passed from generation to generation, Salazar Slytherin, acknowledge this child as my heir in magic and in spirit. Let the knowledge of 1,000 years flow through the bond of blood and will. The vapors surrounding Harry thickened, forming a cocoon of swirling silver that obscured his vision. The pain in his head intensified, spreading down his spine and into every limb. It felt as though his skull might split open, his very thoughts being rearranged and expanded by an external force. Through the haze of pain, Harry maintained his focus on the final words of the ritual, as it was, as it is, as it shall be. The serpent's wisdom passes to the serpent's heir. So I speak, so I intend, so it shall be done. A blinding flash of green and silver light erupted from the center of the circle, momentarily illuminating every corner of the chamber. Harry felt something tear inside his mind, not destructively, but as though a veil were being ripped away, revealing vast chambers of knowledge previously hidden from view. Formulae for potions he had never heard of. Incantations for spells long forgotten by the modern wizarding world. Theories of magical energy that explained phenomena he had only begun to understand. History, strategy, the subtle arts of manipulation and control, all of it poured into his consciousness in a torrent of information too rapid to process consciously. The pain reached a crescendo, and Harry couldn't suppress a cry of agony as he fell to his knees within the circle. The silver vapor condensed around him, sinking into his skin, leaving behind a faint tracery of shimmering lines that resembled scales for a brief moment before fading from view. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. The candles returned to normal, the silver circle dulled to ordinary dust, and the chamber warmed to its usual temperature. Harry remained on his knees, breathing heavily, his mind reeling from the influx of knowledge. It felt as though his brain had been expanded, reconfigured to accommodate vast libraries of information that he could now access with a mere thought. Yet the knowledge wasn't simply dumped into his consciousness, it was integrated, connected to his existing understanding, enhanced by Slytherin's centuries of experience. It is done, Slytherin's voice came from the portrait, softer now but with an unmistakable note of satisfaction. You have survived the ritual, young heir. How do you feel? Harry slowly rose to his feet, wincing at the lingering aches throughout his body. His cut palm had sealed itself, leaving behind a thin silver scar in the shape of a serpent, a permanent mark of the blood magic he had performed. Different, he replied, his voice hoarse. Like my mind has been expanded. I can access memories that aren't mine, knowledge I never learned. He paused, testing this new awareness. I know how to brew Veritaserum now. I understand the theory behind apparition. I could recite the 12 uses of dragon blood, even though I've never read about them. The knowledge transfer was successful then, Slytherin confirmed. Though it will take time for you to fully integrate and apply all that has been shared. Some skills will come more naturally than others. The theoretical knowledge is there, but the practical application will still require practice. Harry nodded, then swayed slightly as a wave of exhaustion hit him. The ritual had drained him, both magically and physically. He stumbled to the small cot he kept in the corner of the chamber, collapsing onto it without bothering to clean up the ritual components. Rest now, Slytherin advised. Your mind and magic need time to adjust to the changes. We will discuss the implications when you have recovered. As Harry drifted toward sleep, his expanded consciousness still buzzing with new knowledge, he became vaguely aware of a disturbance at the edge of his perception. Something was happening above ground, a surge of magical energy, voices, movement. The Watchers, he murmured, struggling to stay awake. They've detected something. The wards will hold, Slytherin assured him. Sleep, young heir. Whatever comes, you are now better prepared to face it than ever before. Harry's eyes closed, his exhausted body surrendering to sleep despite his concern. His last conscious thought was of the silver scar on his palm, a tangible reminder that he was no longer merely Harry Potter, the unwanted orphan in the cupboard under the stairs. He was the heir of Slytherin now, with all the power and responsibility that entailed. A persistent tapping at his cupboard door dragged Harry from the depths of sleep. His eyes fluttered open, struggling to adjust to the dim light filtering through the slats. His body ached, and his mind felt strangely crowded, filled with knowledge that hadn't been there when he'd gone to sleep. The ritual. It hadn't been a dream. Boy! Get up this instant. Aunt Petunia's shrill voice penetrated the thin door. The post has arrived, and Dudley wants his breakfast. Harry sat up slowly, wincing at the lingering soreness in his muscles. The last thing he remembered was collapsing onto the cot in his secret chamber after the ritual. How had he gotten back to his cupboard? He glanced down at his left palm, confirming that the silver serpent scar remained, not a dream, then. But his memories of returning to the house were hazy at best. Coming, Aunt Petunia, he called, his voice steadier than he expected. As he pulled on Dudley's oversized cast-offs, fragments of explanation filtered through his expanded consciousness, knowledge from Slytherin's centuries of experience. Magical exhaustion often caused memory gaps. The body's natural defenses sometimes transported the wizard to a place of safety when critically depleted. It made sense that his magic would have returned him to the cupboard, the place his body recognized as home, however unpleasant it might be. Harry emerged from the cupboard, blinking in the morning light that streamed through the front windows of number 4, Privet Drive. Everything looked normal, oppressively, boringly normal, yet Harry himself felt fundamentally changed. The knowledge imparted by the ritual hummed in his mind, accessible but not overwhelming now that he had rested. Don't just stand there gawping, Aunt Petunia snapped. Get the post, then start on the bacon. And don't you dare burn it this time. Yes, Aunt Petunia, Harry replied automatically, moving toward the front door where the morning mail lay scattered on the doormat. As he bent to collect the letters, Harry noticed something odd, a faint shimmer in the air around the edges of the doorway, visible only when he tilted his head at a certain angle. Wards. Detection charms, if his newly acquired knowledge served correctly. Someone had placed magical monitoring on the Dursley house overnight. The Watchers had been busy while he slept. Harry gathered the mail, bills, a postcard from Aunt Marge, a letter for Uncle Vernon from his sister, and returned to the kitchen, his mind racing behind the calm facade he presented to his relatives. The increased surveillance was almost certainly related to the ritual. Whatever magical energy had escaped his wards had been enough to trigger a response from the Department of Mysteries. Put the post on the table and get cooking, Aunt Petunia ordered, not looking up from the cup of tea she was stirring. Vernon has an important meeting this morning, and everything must be perfect. Harry obeyed, moving mechanically through the familiar routine of preparing breakfast while his mind explored the vast repositories of knowledge now available to him. Defensive magic. Concealment charms. Methods for detecting and circumventing magical surveillance. Slytherin's centuries of experience offered numerous strategies for dealing with his current predicament. As he flipped the bacon, Harry sensed movement outside the kitchen window. A brief glance confirmed his suspicions. Blue Robe was back, this time making no effort to conceal his presence as he stood directly across the street, his detection device spinning rapidly in his hand. The message was clear, they knew something had happened, and they were no longer being subtle about their surveillance. Uncle Vernon stomped into the kitchen, his large face already flushed with the day's first irritation. Where's my coffee, boy? And don't skimp on the bacon. Coming, Uncle Vernon, Harry replied, keeping his tone neutral as he poured the coffee. As he served breakfast to the Dursleys, Harry's enhanced awareness detected additional magical presences around the house, at least 3 observers, maybe more, all maintaining a loose perimeter around number 4. The situation was escalating faster than he had anticipated. He needed to speak with Slytherin urgently, but with this level of surveillance, reaching his hidden chamber undetected would be nearly impossible. He would have to wait until nightfall, when he might have a better chance of slipping away. "Boy!" Uncle Vernon's voice cut through his thoughts. "What are you staring at?" Harry realized he had been looking too long at the window, where Blue Robe remained visible. "Nothing, Uncle Vernon. Just thought I saw a bird." Vernon harumphed, clearly uninterested in Harry's observations. "When you've finished the washing up, I want the garden weeded and the lawn mowed. Petunia's bridge club is coming this afternoon, and the yard had better be spotless." "Yes, Uncle Vernon." The morning passed slowly, with Harry mechanically completing his chores while his mind worked through various scenarios and contingency plans. His newly acquired knowledge suggested several possibilities for dealing with magical surveillance, but most required materials he didn't have or magic too advanced to attempt without preparation. As he weeded the garden under the scorching August sun, Harry was keenly aware of the watchers' eyes upon him. They maintained their positions around the house, occasionally rotating but never leaving a sector unobserved. It was professional, thorough surveillance, the kind used for subjects considered potentially dangerous. A garden snake slithered through the flower bed, pausing near Harry's hand. "Speaker," it hissed softly. "The air tastes of strange magic. Many two-legs watch this nest, with power in their hands." "I know, friend," Harry replied, careful to keep his voice low. "Can you tell me how many there are?" The snake's tongue flicked out, tasting the air. "6 that carry the power. They form a circle around this place. They speak of anomalies and containment. 6 watchers. A full containment team, if Slytherin's knowledge of ministry procedures remained accurate." The situation was even more serious than Harry had initially assessed. "Thank you," he told the snake. "Stay hidden and alert. I may need your eyes later." The snake disappeared into the foliage, and Harry continued his weeding, maintaining the appearance of an ordinary, if somewhat neglected, child. Inside, his mind was anything but ordinary, processing strategies and countermeasures with a clarity and sophistication that would have been impossible before the ritual. By late afternoon, Harry had completed his assigned chores and retreated to his cupboard, ostensibly to stay out of the way during Aunt Petunia's bridge club meeting. In reality, he needed time to think, to plan his next move in this increasingly complicated game. The ritual had changed him, not just by imparting knowledge, but by altering his magical signature in ways that had clearly attracted unwanted attention. If the Department of Mystery suspected dark magic, and blood rituals certainly qualified, they might take more direct action. In the worst case, they might even attempt to remove him from the Dursleys for further study or containment. Harry traced the silver serpent scar on his palm, considering his options. The simplest approach would be to do nothing, to continue playing the role of an ordinary boy with occasional bursts of accidental magic, hoping the watchers would eventually conclude that whatever they had detected was a false alarm. But that strategy relied on their willingness to dismiss their own evidence, which seemed unlikely given the resources they had already committed. No, he needed something more proactive. A controlled demonstration of precisely the kind of magic they would expect from a child his age, something to redirect their suspicions away from blood rituals and ancient knowledge transfers. A plan began to form in Harry's mind, drawing on Slytherin's centuries of experience in manipulation and misdirection. It was risky, but with the right execution, it might give him the breathing room he needed until he could access his chamber and consult with Slytherin's portrait directly. Harry closed his eyes, centering himself as he had been taught. His expanded consciousness made the meditative state easier to achieve now, his mind settling into focused clarity within seconds. He reached for his magic, feeling it respond more readily than ever before, shaped by his will and intent. Then he waited for the perfect moment to implement his plan. The opportunity came sooner than expected. As Aunt Petunia's bridge club meeting reached its conclusion, Harry heard the telltale signs of Dudley returning home, the front door slamming, heavy footsteps in the hallway, the television blaring to life in the living room. Perfect. His cousin had always been an ideal catalyst for accidental magic. Harry emerged from his cupboard, timing his appearance in the hallway to coincide with Dudley's path to the kitchen. The larger boy, always eager for an opportunity to torment his cousin, stuck out his foot as Harry passed. "Watch where you're going, freak," Dudley sneered as Harry stumbled but managed to keep his balance. Harry said nothing, his face carefully blank as he continued toward the kitchen. Behind him, he heard Dudley mutter in disappointment at the lack of reaction. "That wouldn't do at all." "What's the matter, Potter?" Dudley called after him. "Too scared to talk? Or did Mum finally cut out your tongue like she's always threatening?" Harry paused, turning slowly to face his cousin. He allowed a flicker of genuine anger to surface, not difficult given years of Dudley's bullying, but kept it tightly controlled, channeling it precisely as Slytherin had taught him. "Leave me alone, Dudley," he said quietly. Dudley's piggy eyes lit up at the response, sensing the potential for entertainment. "Or what? What are you going to do about it, freak?" He advanced toward Harry, fists already clenched in anticipation. This was it, the moment Harry had been waiting for. As Dudley moved to shove him, Harry reached for his magic, carefully modulating it to produce exactly the kind of defensive burst that would be expected from an untrained wizard child under threat. Not the precise, controlled magic he was now capable of, but something rawer, more instinctive. He allowed his magic to push outward just as Dudley made contact, creating a small shockwave that knocked his cousin back several steps. Simultaneously, he directed a subtle pulse of energy toward the living room, where Aunt Petunia was saying goodbye to her bridge club members. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The lights flickered throughout the house. The television in the living room emitted a high-pitched whine before shutting off. In the kitchen, the tap turned on by itself, spraying water in an arc across the room. It was a textbook case of emotionally triggered accidental magic, exactly what the watchers would expect from a threatened wizard child approaching Hogwarts age. Dudley stumbled backward, his face pale with shock and fear. Mum," he wailed. "He's doing it again. The freaky stuff." Aunt Petunia rushed into the hallway, her thin face contorted with horror and embarrassment as she realized what had happened in front of her departing guests. "You," she hissed at Harry, her voice trembling with fury. "In your cupboard. Now. Just wait until Vernon hears about this." Harry allowed himself to be shoved toward the cupboard, maintaining an expression of confusion and fear appropriate for a child who didn't understand his own abilities. As the door slammed shut behind him, he heard Aunt Petunia making hurried apologies to her guests, blaming a power surge for the strange occurrences. In the darkness of the cupboard, Harry allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. The performance had been perfect, a convincing display of accidental magic that would give the watchers exactly what they expected to see. If his understanding of magical theory was correct, the energy signature of this incident would help mask the lingering traces of the ritual, providing a plausible explanation for whatever anomalies their detectors had registered. Now he just needed to wait for nightfall, when he might have a chance to reach his chamber undetected. The watchers would be more vigilant after this display, but also potentially less suspicious of darker magic. With luck, they would attribute the previous night's energy surge to the natural maturation of his magical core, triggered by his 10th birthday. Harry settled back on his thin mattress, tracing the silver serpent scar on his palm. The knowledge imparted by the ritual continued to integrate with his existing understanding, revealing new depths and connections with each passing hour. Despite the complications and dangers it had brought, he couldn't bring himself to regret the ritual. For the first time in his life, he felt truly prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead, including his eventual entry into the wizarding world, where he would no longer be just the boy who lived, but the true heir of Slytherin. The house had finally grown quiet, the Dursleys retreating to their beds after a tense evening. Uncle Vernon had been apoplectic about the freakishness in front of Aunt Petunia's bridge club, threatening Harry with a week locked in the cupboard. Only Aunt Petunia's reluctant intervention, reminding Vernon that people would ask questions if Harry didn't appear for days, had reduced the punishment to missing dinner and extra chores for the remainder of the summer. Harry had accepted the punishment with apparent meekness, all the while monitoring the magical presences around the house through his enhanced senses. The Watchers remained, but their pattern had shifted. Instead of the tight surveillance perimeter they had maintained earlier, they now seemed to be operating in a more relaxed observation mode, with fewer personnel. His distraction had worked. As midnight approached, Harry lay on his mattress, breathing slowly and evenly as if asleep while extending his magical awareness beyond the confines of his cupboard. 3 Watchers remained, one at the front of the house, one at the back, and one positioned to observe the side where Harry's cupboard was located. Their magical signatures were muted, suggesting they were using concealment charms to avoid detection by Muggle neighbors. Harry considered his options. Reaching his underground chamber would be challenging with a Watcher positioned near the garden, but not impossible. The knowledge from Slytherin's ritual had given him several methods for magical concealment, though attempting them so soon after his accidental magic display might trigger renewed suspicion. No, he needed a different approach, something that wouldn't register as intentional magic. The answer came from an unexpected source, the garden snakes. During his years of training with Slytherin, Harry had developed a network of serpentine allies who watched and reported to him. Those same snakes might now provide the distraction he needed. Harry closed his eyes, focusing his mind on the Parseltongue command he wished to send. It wasn't magic in the traditional sense, more an extension of his natural ability to communicate with serpents, but it required intense concentration to project the call beyond the confines of the house. Friends with scales and silent movement, he hissed softly, I seek your aid. The Watchers who surround this dwelling must be drawn away from the garden path. Can you provide distraction? For several long minutes, there was no response, and Harry wondered if his call had reached beyond the cupboard walls. Then, faintly, he felt a familiar presence, not heard, but sensed, a chorus of sibilant acknowledgments from various serpents in the vicinity. They had heard, and they would help. Harry waited patiently, maintaining his appearance of sleep while extending his awareness toward the garden. After nearly half an hour, he detected movement, the Watcher positioned at the side of the house shifting position suddenly, their magical signature flaring with surprise. The distraction had begun. Harry rose silently from his mattress, placing his ear against the cupboard door to ensure the hallway was empty. Satisfied, he carefully unlocked the door from the inside, a simple trick he had mastered years ago, and slipped into the darkened hall. Moving with the silent precision Slytherin had drilled into him, Harry made his way to the back door. Through the kitchen window, he could see the garden illuminated by moonlight, and the unmistakable sign of his distraction in action. At least a dozen garden snakes had converged on the property, slithering in patterns that couldn't possibly be natural. The Watcher who had been stationed at the back was now moving cautiously through the garden, wand extended, clearly trying to determine whether the unusual serpent activity represented a magical threat. Perfect. Harry waited for the Watcher to move toward the far side of the garden, then silently opened the back door just enough to slip through. Once outside, he pressed himself against the shadow of the house, his movements slow and deliberate as he made his way toward the garden shed. The Watcher's attention remained focused on the snakes, which were now converging toward the opposite corner of the garden in an eerily coordinated display. Harry took advantage of the distraction to dart across the open space to the shed, slipping inside and quickly pulling the door nearly closed behind him, leaving just enough space to observe the garden. The Watcher, a tall, slender figure in dark robes, was now actively casting detection spells, their wand movements precise and professional. Harry recognized the spells from Slytherin's knowledge, standard ministry procedures for identifying magical threats. Finding nothing beyond ordinary garden snakes behaving oddly, the Watcher appeared increasingly perplexed. Harry didn't waste the opportunity. Moving to the back of the shed, he carefully shifted the false panel that concealed the entrance to his underground chamber. The narrow passage beyond was pitch black, but Harry didn't dare risk even the faintest Lumos charm with a trained observer so close by. Instead, he descended by touch and memory, pulling the panel back into place above him. Only when he reached the bottom of the passage did Harry allow himself to relax slightly. The chamber's protections were still intact, layers of wards designed to conceal magical activity within. He activated the magical lights with a wandless gesture, illuminating the familiar space. Everything remained as he had left it after the ritual, the silver dust circle now dull and inert, the black candles burned down to stubs, the small silver dish still containing traces of dried blood and herbs. At the far wall, Slytherin's portrait regarded him with calculating interest. "You've returned, young heir," Slytherin observed. "And not a moment too soon. I sense the surveillance has increased significantly." 6 watchers earlier today, now reduced to 3, Harry confirmed, moving to clear away the ritual components. "Department of Mysteries, I think, just as you suspected. They've placed detection wards around the house. To be expected after our working. Blood magic leaves distinctive traces. Tell me, how do you feel? Has the knowledge transfer stabilized?" Harry paused, considering the question carefully. "Yes, I think so. It was overwhelming at first, but now it feels integrated. I can access the information without it flooding my consciousness. It's like having a vast library in my mind, where I can pull specific books as needed." Slytherin's painted lips curved in satisfaction. "Excellent. The ritual was successful then, perhaps even more so than I anticipated. And the blood bond?" His gaze dropped to Harry's palm, where the silver serpent scar gleamed faintly in the magical light. Harry held up his hand, examining the scar. "It's permanent, as you said it would be. I can feel something through it. A connection. As though a part of you exists within me now. Not just a part, young heir. The ritual forged a true magical inheritance. You carry my knowledge, yes, but also my magical legacy, spells and techniques unique to my bloodline. You are, in the most meaningful sense, my heir now." The implications of that statement settled over Harry like a weight, both a burden and a mantle of power. He was no longer merely learning from Slytherin, he had become an extension of the Founder's legacy, a vessel for magic and knowledge that had been lost to the wizarding world for centuries. "What happens now?" Harry asked. "The Watchers won't simply leave, will they?" "No," Slytherin acknowledged. "But neither can they act without cause. Your display of accidental magic was cleverly executed, it provides a plausible explanation for the energy they detected. They will likely maintain surveillance until your Hogwarts letter arrives, watching for further anomalies." "My letter? That's nearly a year away." "Indeed. Which gives us time to prepare. The ritual has provided the knowledge, now you must develop the skill to use it effectively. And most importantly, you must perfect your masking, the ability to conceal your true abilities behind the facade of an ordinary wizard child." Harry nodded, understanding the strategy. When he eventually entered the wizarding world, it would be advantageous to be underestimated, to have others see only what he wanted them to see. "I staged another incident of accidental magic today," he told Slytherin. "Made it look emotional and uncontrolled. The Watchers seem to accept it as normal for someone my age." "Good. Such incidents should continue periodically, enough to establish a pattern of typical magical development, but not so frequent as to suggest unusual power. Meanwhile, your true practice will continue here, shielded from their detection." Harry began methodically cleaning the ritual components, his mind already planning the training regimen he would follow in the coming months. With Slytherin's knowledge now accessible, he could advance far more rapidly than before, focusing on practical application rather than basic theory. "There's one thing I don't understand," he said after a moment. "If the Watchers are from the Department of Mysteries, why haven't they contacted Dumbledore? Surely the headmaster of Hogwarts would want to know about unusual magic from the boy who lived." Slytherin's expression turned calculating. "An excellent question. The Department of Mysteries operates independently, even from the headmaster. They study magical phenomena for their own purposes, often keeping their findings secret even from the minister himself. If they have not informed Dumbledore of their observations, it suggests they have their own agenda regarding your development. What kind of agenda? That remains to be seen. But it adds another layer to our game, young heir. Not only must you prepare for Hogwarts and whatever plans Dumbledore might have for you there, but also for whatever interest the Department of Mysteries has in your unique magical signature. Harry contemplated this additional complication, feeling neither discouraged nor overwhelmed. Instead, the challenge sparked a kind of cold excitement, a recognition that the game was becoming more complex and, therefore, more interesting. "I'll be ready," he said simply, his green eyes reflecting the magical light of the chamber. "For all of it." In his portrait, Salazar Slytherin smiled, a smile that held centuries of cunning and ambition. "Yes," he agreed. "I believe you will." As Harry continued clearing away the remnants of the ritual, he felt the silver serpent scar on his palm warm slightly, pulsing in time with his heartbeat. The bond was complete, the knowledge transferred, the path set. Whatever came next, Watchers, Hogwarts, Dumbledore, or forces as yet unknown, Harry Potter, heir of Slytherin, would face it with resources few could imagine and fewer still could counter. The coldest Dark Lord in history was beginning to emerge, forged in the crucible of neglect and empowered by ancient knowledge. And the wizarding world, for all its magic and mystery, had no idea what was coming. Chapter 2, Masks and Machinations. The Hogwarts Express gleamed scarlet against the billowing steam that filled platform 9 3/4. 11-year-old Harry Potter stood apart from the bustling crowd, observing the tearful goodbyes and excited reunions with the detached interest of an anthropologist studying a foreign culture. In many ways, that's exactly what he was doing. Despite nearly a year of preparation using the knowledge gained from Slytherin's ritual, the wizarding world remained largely theoretical to him, facts and histories absorbed but not experienced firsthand. Until today. Harry adjusted the sleeve of his new school robe, ensuring it properly covered the silver serpent scar on his palm. The past year had been one of intense preparation and careful maneuvering. The Watchers, whom he now knew with certainty to be Division 7 Unspeakables, an elite research unit within the Department of Mysteries, had maintained sporadic surveillance of Privet Drive, but their presence had diminished over time as Harry carefully staged occasional bursts of accidental magic that aligned with normal developmental patterns. His Hogwarts letter had arrived exactly as Slytherin predicted, delivered by a stern-faced witch named Professor McGonagall, who clearly expected to find a neglected, ignorant child. Harry had played his part perfectly, wide-eyed amazement at the revelation of magic, hesitant questions about his parents and the wizarding world, carefully concealed fury at the Dursleys' lies. McGonagall had left satisfied that the boy who lived, while clearly mistreated by his Muggle relatives, was otherwise an ordinary wizard child eager to learn about his heritage. If only she knew. "Need a hand with that trunk, dear?" A plump, red-haired woman approached, smiling kindly at Harry, who had been standing with his school trunk beside him. "Yes, please," Harry replied with a carefully calibrated smile, grateful but not desperate. "It's heavier than it looks." "Fred." "George," the woman called to a pair of identical twins with flaming red hair. "Come help, goodness, you're Harry Potter, aren't you?" Harry allowed his expression to shift to mild embarrassment, the reaction expected of someone unused to recognition. "Yes, ma'am," he said quietly. The woman's eyes widened slightly, but to her credit, she quickly composed herself. "Well, it's lovely to meet you, dear. I'm Molly Weasley. These are my sons, Fred and George, the twins. My youngest son Ron is starting Hogwarts this year too, and this is my daughter Ginny, she'll be going next year." As the Weasley twins helped load his trunk onto the train, Harry filed away the names and relationships with the methodical precision Slytherin had taught him. Connections were currency in the wizarding world, and the Weasleys, while not politically powerful, were a prominent pure-blood family with numerous children, potential allies or, at minimum, useful information sources. "Thank you," he told the twins once his trunk was safely stowed in an empty compartment. "No problem, Harry Potter, our pleasure entirely, consider it our contribution to history." The twins spoke in a rhythmic back and forth that Harry found both irritating and impressive. Their identical grins hinted at mischief, and Harry made a mental note to learn more about them. Pranksters often made the best spies, whether they realized it or not. As the Weasleys moved away, Harry settled into the compartment, reaching into the pocket of his robe to touch the miniaturized portrait of Salazar Slytherin. The portrait had been his constant companion throughout the past year, shrunk down to the size of a playing card with a complex charm that maintained all its magical properties. Enlarging and reducing it had become second nature, allowing Harry to consult with Slytherin in private whenever necessary. Not that he needed constant guidance anymore. The knowledge transfer from the blood ritual had given Harry access to centuries of magical theory and practice. What he lacked now was not information but experience, the practical application of that knowledge in the real wizarding world. The compartment door slid open, revealing the youngest Weasley boy, Ron, if Harry remembered correctly. "Mind if I sit here?" he asked. "Everywhere else is full." Harry gestured to the empty seat opposite him. "Go ahead." As the train pulled out of the station, Harry observed Ron Weasley with careful attention. The boy was tall and gangly, with a smudge on his nose and worn, hand-me-down clothing that reminded Harry uncomfortably of his own pre-Hogwarts wardrobe. But unlike Harry, Ron seemed untroubled by his second-hand possessions, suggesting a childhood of poverty but not neglect. "I'm Ron, by the way." "Ron Weasley," he introduced himself after a moment of awkward silence. "Harry Potter," Harry replied, allowing a hint of friendliness into his voice. First impressions mattered, and while he had no intention of revealing his true nature, neither did he wish to appear aloof or unfriendly, traits that might draw unwanted attention. Ron's eyes widened. "So it's true then? I thought Fred and George were having me on. Do you really have the, you know?" He gestured vaguely toward Harry's forehead. With practiced ease, Harry brushed back his bangs to reveal the lightning-shaped scar. "Yes, but I don't remember anything about that night," he said, anticipating the inevitable question. "Just a flash of green light." This was a carefully constructed half-truth. In reality, the knowledge from Slytherin had helped Harry access fragmented memories of that night, his mother's desperate pleading, Voldemort's cold high laugh, the searing pain as the curse rebounded. But such revelations would raise uncomfortable questions about how an untrained 11-year-old could recover suppressed memories. "Wicked," Ron breathed, staring at the scar with undisguised fascination. "Is it true you were raised by Muggles? What were they like?" "Horrible," Harry said truthfully, allowing genuine emotion to color his voice for the first time. "Not all Muggles, I suppose, but my aunt and uncle and cousins certainly were. They hated magic, hated anything they considered abnormal." Ron looked horrified. "That's mental. How could anyone hate magic?" "Fear, mostly," Harry replied with a shrug that belied the years of calculated resentment he had nurtured. "They were afraid of what they couldn't understand, couldn't control." Their conversation was interrupted when the compartment door slid open again, revealing a girl with bushy brown hair and rather large front teeth. "Has anyone seen a toad?" "A boy named Neville's lost one," she said in a bossy sort of voice. Harry recognized the interruption as an opportunity to observe another potential classmate. "No toads here," he replied, "but I know a summoning charm that might help." Both Ron and the girl looked at him with surprise. "You can already do magic?" the girl asked, sounding both impressed and slightly affronted. "I've tried a few simple spells myself, just for practice, and they've all worked for me, but I didn't think anyone else would be practicing before school started." "It's just a simple charm," Harry said modestly, though the truth was far more complex. The knowledge from Slytherin had given him theoretical mastery of spells far beyond first-year level, though his practical experience remained limited by his need for secrecy. "Well, let's see it then," the girl challenged, stepping fully into the compartment and sitting down beside Ron. Harry drew his wand, 11 inches, holly and phoenix feather, the brother to Voldemort's own wand according to the wand-maker Ollivander. The connection had not surprised him. Slytherin's knowledge had already suggested that his scar represented a magical link to the Dark Lord, one that might manifest in various ways. Accio Neville's toad, Harry said, executing the wand movement with deliberate imprecision. He could have performed the spell wandlessly, but that would have revealed far too much about his true capabilities. For a moment, nothing happened. Then there was a faint croaking sound from the corridor, followed by the appearance of a large toad hopping reluctantly into the compartment, drawn by the magic but fighting against it due to the intentionally weak casting. "That's amazing," the girl exclaimed. "That's a fourth-year charm, at least. I'm Hermione Granger, by the way. And you are?" "Harry Potter," he replied, watching her expression shift from academic interest to historical curiosity. "Are you really?" Hermione asked. "I've read all about you, of course. You're in modern magical history and the rise and fall of the dark arts and great wizarding events of the 20th century." "Am I?" Harry feigned modest surprise. In truth, he had acquired and studied these books months ago, analyzing how the wizarding world portrayed his encounter with Voldemort. The books were largely speculation wrapped in a veneer of historical fact, useful for understanding public perception but virtually worthless as accurate accounts. "Goodness, didn't you know?" "I'd have found out everything I could if it was me," Hermione said. "Do either of you know what house you'll be in?" "I've been asking around, and I hope I'm in Gryffindor. It sounds by far the best. I hear Dumbledore himself was in it, but I suppose Ravenclaw wouldn't be too bad." As Hermione continued her rapid-fire commentary, Harry filed away her personality traits: intelligent, ambitious, eager to prove herself, somewhat socially awkward. A useful contact, perhaps even an ally, if properly managed. Ron looked less impressed. "Whatever house I'm in, I hope she's not," he muttered to Harry as Hermione paused to breathe. The redhead seemed overwhelmed by her intensity, reinforcing Harry's initial impression of him as straightforward and somewhat intellectually limited. "I should go tell Neville we've found his toad," Hermione said, picking up the hapless amphibian. "You two had better change into your robes. I expect we'll be arriving soon." With that, she departed as suddenly as she had arrived, leaving a momentary silence in her wake. "Mental, that one," Ron commented, shaking his head. "Whatever house I'm in, I hope it's Gryffindor. My whole family's been in it. Imagine being in Slytherin. I think I'd leave, wouldn't you?" Harry kept his expression neutral. "I don't think any of the houses are inherently bad," he said carefully. "It's more about what you do with the qualities you have." Ron looked dubious but didn't argue the point. As they changed into their school robes, Harry felt the miniaturized portrait warm slightly against his chest, a signal that Slytherin wished to speak with him. It would have to wait until he had privacy. The remainder of the journey passed in a blur of activity. The sweet trolley came and went. A brief confrontation occurred with a pale, pointy-faced boy named Draco Malfoy who seemed intent on establishing himself as either an ally or enemy, and eventually the train began to slow as it approached Hogsmeade Station. As the first years were led toward the boats by the enormous gamekeeper, Hagrid, Harry took his first glimpse of Hogwarts Castle rising majestically against the night sky. Despite all his preparation, despite the knowledge and power he had accumulated, he felt a momentary childlike wonder at the sight. This was his heritage, not just as a wizard, but as the heir to one of the four founders whose magic had helped create this magnificent structure. The boat ride across the Black Lake was eerily peaceful. Harry shared his boat with Ron, Hermione, and the round-faced boy named Neville who had lost his toad. As they glided silently across the water, Harry extended his magical senses as Slytherin had taught him, feeling the ancient protections that surrounded the school, layers upon layers of wards, enchantments, and magical boundaries, some of which resonated with a familiar energy that he recognized from his blood bond with Slytherin. The castle welcomed him like a long-lost relative returning home. When they reached the shore, Professor McGonagall met them and led the first years into a small chamber off the Great Hall. Her speech about the four houses passed over Harry like white noise, information he had known for years. Instead, he focused on the magical energies swirling around them, the portraits that watched with undisguised interest, and the ghost of the bloody Baron who drifted through one wall with a melancholy expression that brightened slightly when his gaze fell on Harry. Interesting. The ghost had recognized something in him, perhaps the echo of Slytherin's magic that now resided within his blood. The sorting ceremony began with all the pomp and tradition Slytherin's knowledge had led Harry to expect. The enchanted ceiling of the great hall reflected a clear night sky, while thousands of candles floated overhead, illuminating 4 long tables where older students watched the nervous first years with varying degrees of interest. At the head table sat the professors, including a hook-nosed man with greasy black hair who was staring at Harry with an intensity that bordered on hostility. Severus Snape. Potions Master. Former Death Eater turned spy, if Slytherin's information remained accurate. A skilled legilimens and potential threat to Harry's secrets. Harry broke eye contact casually, implementing the first layer of his occlumency shields, not the impenetrable barriers he was capable of, which might raise suspicion, but a subtle misdirection that would present his surface thoughts as appropriately childlike and awestruck. When I call your name, you will put on the hat and sit on the stool to be sorted, Professor McGonagall announced, holding a long roll of parchment. The sorting began, with Abbott, Hannah, becoming a Hufflepuff and Bones, Susan, following her. Harry observed each sorting with careful attention, noting not just the houses but the speed of the hat's decisions, the reactions of the students at each table, and the subtle shifts in the professor's expressions. By the time Granger, Hermione, was called, he had identified several patterns, including Snape's apparent disinterest in anyone sorted outside his own house. Hermione's sorting took nearly a full minute before the hat declared Gryffindor. Ron groaned softly beside Harry, while Hermione beamed as she hurried to the red and gold table. Draco Malfoy's sorting was the opposite extreme, the hat had barely touched his slick-back blonde hair before shouting, Slytherin. The boy swaggered toward the green and silver table with the confidence of someone who had never doubted his destination. When Potter, Harry, was finally called, the great hall fell momentarily silent before erupting in whispers. Harry moved forward with deliberate calmness, aware that every eye was upon him, including those of the Division 7 operative he had spotted at the staff table, a dark-skinned man seated at the far end, observing with the same detached interest Harry had noted in blue robe. As the sorting hat descended over his eyes, Harry prepared himself for the mental contact. Slytherin had warned him about the hat's ability to see into the minds of students, but had also assured him that it was bound by ancient magic to keep its discoveries confidential. Interesting, a small voice said in his ear. Very interesting indeed. Oh my, what have we here? Knowledge far beyond your years, ambition in abundance, and a connection to Salazar himself. How unexpected. You can see it all, then. Harry thought directly to the hat. I see everything, Mr. Potter. Every thought, every memory, every secret. Including your unique education. Salazar's heir in truth, if not in blood. Though there is something more here, something deeply hidden even from yourself. Will you tell Dumbledore? The hat seemed to chuckle. I am bound by magic older than the headmaster himself. Your secrets remain your own, Mr. Potter. But I must place you where you belong. With such knowledge, such ambition, such ruthlessness, there can be only one choice. Wait, Harry thought quickly. Would it not be more advantageous for me to be placed elsewhere? To maintain the facade. Cunning, yes, very cunning. But no, Mr. Potter. The magic in your blood calls to its source. You belong in Slytherin. The hat shouted the last word to the entire hall, and a profound silence followed. Harry removed the hat with steady hands, noting the shocked expressions throughout the hall. At the Gryffindor table, Ron Weasley looked betrayed. At the head table, Dumbledore's twinkling eyes had momentarily dimmed, while McGonagall appeared stunned. Snape's expression was unreadable, a perfect mask that Harry recognized as the mark of a skilled occlumens. Then, slowly, the Slytherin table began to applaud. Draco Malfoy looked both surprised and calculating, clearly reassessing his earlier interaction with Harry on the train. The ghost of the Bloody Baron inclined his head in what might have been respect. Harry walked calmly to the Slytherin table, taking a seat next to a tall, dark-skinned boy who introduced himself as Blaise Zabini. Across from them sat Draco Malfoy and his two large companions, Crabbe and Vincent. "Well, this is a surprise," Malfoy drawled, though his grey eyes were sharp with interest. "The famous Harry Potter in Slytherin. Father will find this very interesting indeed." "Surprised?" Harry replied with a slight smile. "The hat seems to think I belong here." "It does raise questions," said a cold female voice from further down the table. Harry turned to see a girl with long black hair and ice-blue eyes regarding him with analytical precision. "The boy who lived in the House of Snakes. The papers will have a field day." "Daphne Greengrass," Blaise supplied in a low voice. "Her family stayed neutral during the last war. Old money, older bloodlines." Harry nodded slightly in acknowledgement. "I'm more concerned with the present than the past," he said, addressing Daphne directly. "Or what the papers think." Daphne's lips curved in what might have been approval before she returned to her conversation with a pug-faced girl beside her. Harry noted the interaction with interest. Daphne Greengrass was clearly intelligent and politically aware, someone to watch carefully. The remainder of the feast passed in a blur of introductions and subtle power plays as the Slytherins assessed their unexpected new housemate. Harry participated enough to appear engaged while revealing little, presenting the image of a somewhat reserved but not unfriendly boy still adjusting to the wizarding world. It was a calculated performance, designed to buy him time and space to establish his true position within Slytherin House. The whispers and stares from other tables confirmed that his sorting had upended expectations across the school, exactly the kind of misdirection that might distract from more significant secrets. As the feast concluded, Dumbledore rose to give his start-of-term announcements, including a peculiar warning about the third-floor corridor on the right-hand side being off-limits to anyone who didn't wish to die a very painful death. Harry filed this information away. Such a specific and dramatic warning virtually guaranteed student interest, suggesting it might be a deliberate security measure for something hidden within the school. When the prefects led the first years from the Great Hall, Harry noticed the Division 7 operative engaging Snape in quiet conversation, both men glancing briefly in his direction. The surveillance, it seemed, would continue at Hogwarts. The Slytherin common room was located in the dungeons, behind a stone wall that opened when given the password, Salazar. The space beyond was elegant and atmospheric, a long, low-ceilinged room with green-tinged lamps and dark leather furniture. Large windows looked out into the depths of the lake, giving the entire room an otherworldly, greenish cast. Harry felt an immediate sense of recognition, as though he had been here before. The knowledge from Slytherin included memories of this very room, though it had changed somewhat over the centuries. The core, however, remained the same, a sanctuary for those with ambition and cunning, those who understood that power often required shadows to flourish. "First years, gather round," called the male prefect, a fifth year named Adrian Pusey. "Professor Snape, our head of house, will be addressing you shortly. In the meantime, a few house rules. Slytherins present a united front outside these walls. Whatever disagreements you may have with each other stay within the common room. We support each other publicly, regardless of personal feelings. Understood?" There were nods all around as the first years absorbed this first lesson in house politics. Harry noted the practical wisdom of the approach. Internal conflicts remained private, preventing other houses from exploiting divisions within Slytherin. When Snape swept into the common room a few minutes later, the atmosphere shifted immediately. The older students straightened, conversation ceased, and all attention focused on the Dour Potions master. Harry observed the respect Snape commanded, not affection, necessarily, but a clear recognition of his authority and power. "Welcome to Slytherin House," Snape began, his voice soft but carrying clearly through the silent room. "You have been sorted into the House of Ambition, Cunning, and Resourcefulness. Contrary to popular belief, this does not make you dark wizards, merely those who understand that greatness requires more than blind courage or dusty knowledge. His dark gaze swept over the assembled students, lingering momentarily on Harry before continuing. As Slytherins, you will face prejudice from other houses. They will assume the worst of you based solely on your house affiliation. Prove them wrong through excellence, not confrontation. I expect top marks, impeccable behavior, and absolute discretion in all matters. Snape's speech continued, outlining expectations and consequences with clinical precision. Harry listened attentively while simultaneously maintaining his occlumency shields, aware that at any moment Snape might attempt to glimpse his thoughts. The knowledge from Slytherin had warned him about this possibility. Snape was known to use passive legilimency on students, particularly those he suspected of hiding something. When Snape finally dismissed them, directing the first years to their dormitories, Harry felt the brush of mental pressure against his outer shields, subtle enough that an untrained mind would never have detected it, but unmistakable to Harry's enhanced awareness. He allowed surface impressions to leak through: nervousness about fitting in, curiosity about his new surroundings, mild homesickness despite the Dursleys' mistreatment. All normal, expected emotions for a first-year student. The pressure withdrew after a moment, and Snape's expression revealed nothing as he turned to leave the common room. First test passed, if only barely. The first-year boys' dormitory contained 6 four-poster beds with green silk hangings and silver embroidery. Harry's trunk had already been placed at the foot of one bed, positioned between Blaise Zabini's and Theodore Knott's. Draco Malfoy had claimed the bed furthest from the door, with Crabbe and Goyle positioned like sentries on either side. As his dorm mates prepared for bed, chattering about classes and Quidditch and family connections, Harry created the quiet, unobtrusive persona he would present for the coming days: friendly but reserved, competent but not exceptional, ambitious but not threatening. It was a delicate balance, designed to deflect attention while he assessed the political landscape of Slytherin House and Hogwarts at large. Only when the others had drawn their bed curtains and fallen asleep did Harry finally erect privacy wards around his own bed, subtle enough not to trigger the castle's monitoring charms, but sufficient to prevent casual eavesdropping. From his robe pocket, he retrieved Slytherin's miniaturized portrait, enlarging it to its proper size with a whispered charm and propping it against the headboard. "Well?" Slytherin asked in Parseltongue, his painted eyes gleaming in the dim light. "How does my house fare after 1,000 years?" "Much as you described it," Harry replied in the same sibilant language. "Though perhaps more overtly political than in your day. The divisions between houses seem more pronounced." "Unsurprising. Godric's influence always did tend toward tribalism." Slytherin's expression turned thoughtful. "The Sorting Hat placed you here despite your request for misdirection." "Interesting. It suggests your connection to me runs deeper than even I anticipated." "Is that a problem?" Harry asked, keeping his voice low despite the privacy wards. "Being sorted into Slytherin makes maintaining a facade more difficult. People will expect certain behaviors, certain allegiances. It presents both challenges and opportunities, young heir. Yes, expectations will be higher, scrutiny more intense. But you also gain access to networks and knowledge that would be denied to you elsewhere. And remember, the best place to hide is often in plain sight. Who would expect the true heir of Slytherin to be so obvious as to be sorted into Slytherin?" Harry considered this perspective. There was truth to it. Sometimes the most effective deception was wrapped in a veneer of honesty. His sorting had certainly shocked the school, but that very shock might distract from deeper secrets. "Snape attempted to read my thoughts," he informed Slytherin. "Just a surface scan, but it confirms your warnings about his abilities." Severus Snape. "Yes, his reputation as a skilled occlumens and legilimens is well earned, according to the portraits I've consulted over the years. You must be exceptionally careful around him, maintain your shields at all times, but ensure they appear natural, like the unformed mental barriers of a child with strong innate protection rather than trained defenses." "And the Division 7 operative at the head table?" Harry asked. He seemed to be conferring with Snape after the feast. Slytherin's painted eyes narrowed. That complicates matters. If the Department of Mysteries has placed an agent at Hogwarts, they must have significant concerns about something, or someone. Whether that someone is you remains to be seen, but we must assume they are monitoring magical signatures throughout the castle. Which means my practice must be even more discreet than we planned, Harry concluded. No advanced magic where it might be detected. Precisely. For now, focus on establishing your public persona and identifying potential allies or threats among your peers. The coming weeks will reveal much about the current state of play at Hogwarts. Harry nodded, his mind already cataloguing the information he had gathered during this first evening, the political dynamics of Slytherin House, the watchful eyes of Snape and the Division 7 operative, Dumbledore's curious warning about the third-floor corridor. Pieces of a puzzle that was only beginning to take shape. One last thing, Slytherin said as Harry prepared to reduce the portrait to its travel size. The turban-wearing professor, the one who avoided looking directly at any student. Did you sense anything unusual about him? Harry thought back to the feast, recalling the nervous-looking man with the purple turban who had been introduced as Professor Quirrell, the defense against the dark arts teacher. He seemed divided somehow. As though his magical signature wasn't entirely his own. Why? A suspicion only, Slytherin replied, though his expression suggested otherwise. Watch him closely in the coming days. Sometimes the greatest threats were the most unassuming masks. With that cryptic warning, Harry reduced the portrait and tucked it safely into his trunk, beneath a false bottom he had installed specifically for this purpose. As he lay in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the gentle lapping of the lake against the dormitory windows, he reflected on how drastically his life had changed in the 6 years since discovering Slytherin's portrait in his cupboard. From abused and ignorant child to the secret heir of one of the greatest wizards in history, now positioned at the very heart of the wizarding world. It was a transformation even more profound than the one most Muggle-raised students experienced upon entering Hogwarts. And it was only the beginning. The first weeks at Hogwarts established the rhythm that would define Harry's double life at school. On the surface, he presented himself as a competent but not exceptional student, completing assignments on time, answering questions when called upon but rarely volunteering, producing spellwork that was above average but not suspiciously advanced. Beneath this carefully constructed facade, however, Harry was constantly observing, analyzing, and planning. Every interaction, every lesson, every casual conversation in the common room provided data that he methodically collected and evaluated. Who held power in each house? Which professors could be manipulated? What secrets lay hidden beneath Hogwarts' ancient stones? His dormmates quickly established their own hierarchies. Draco Malfoy positioned himself as the leader of the first-year Slytherins, leveraging his family name and political connections. Theodore Nott maintained a quiet, bookish persona that Harry recognized as its own kind of mask. There was calculation behind Nott's seemingly indifferent exterior. Blaise Zabini cultivated an air of sophisticated detachment, observing the others with sardonic amusement. Crabbe and Goyle served as Malfoy's loyal enforcers, though Harry suspected there was more intelligence behind their brutish exteriors than they revealed publicly. Among the Slytherin girls, Daphne Greengrass quickly emerged as a power in her own right, cold, analytical, and unwilling to defer to Malfoy's authority simply because of his gender or family name. Pansy Parkinson attached herself to Malfoy like a remora, while Tracy Davis and Millicent Bulstrode formed their own alliance of convenience. Outside of Slytherin, Harry maintained cautious contact with students from other houses, particularly those who might prove useful. Hermione Granger's intelligence and drive made her a valuable resource, despite her placement in Gryffindor. Her eagerness for acceptance made her surprisingly responsive to Harry's carefully calibrated friendship, which consisted mainly of study sessions in the library where he could simultaneously monitor her academic discoveries and maintain the appearance of cross-house cooperation. "I don't understand why everyone was so shocked when you were sorted into Slytherin," Hermione said one afternoon as they worked on a particularly tedious potions essay. "Ambition isn't a bad quality. Without it, we'd never advance as a society." Harry glanced up from his parchment, momentarily surprised by her insight. "Most people don't see it that way," he replied, measuring his words carefully. They associate Slytherin with dark magic because of Voldemort and his followers. Hermione flinched slightly at the name but recovered quickly. That's just prejudice. It's like saying all Germans are Nazis because of Hitler. It's illogical and historically inaccurate. Exactly, Harry agreed, finding himself genuinely impressed with her perspective. Houses don't make wizards dark or light, choices do. Well, I think it's brave of you to be different, Hermione declared, returning to her essay with renewed determination. To challenge expectations. Harry hid a smile at the irony of her statement. If only she knew just how different he truly was, how thoroughly he was challenging not just expectations but the very foundations of Wizarding Society's understanding of magic. His relationship with Ron Weasley had cooled significantly after his sorting, though not irreparably. The redhead maintained a wary distance, clearly struggling between his ingrained prejudice against Slytherins and his prior connection with Harry on the train. "Doesn't it bother you?" Ron asked during one of their infrequent conversations in the corridor between classes. "Being in the same house as, the people who followed you-know-who? Should it bother me to be in the same species as muggles who commit atrocities?" Harry countered, keeping his tone mild but pointed. "Evil isn't confined to one house, Ron. Peter Pettigrew was a Gryffindor, and he betrayed my parents to Voldemort." Ron winced at the name but looked thoughtful, a small victory in Harry's ongoing campaign to identify and challenge simplistic thinking wherever he encountered it. Such black-and-white worldviews were obstacles to his long-term goals, which required far more nuanced understanding of power and its applications. In classes, Harry maintained his deliberate mediocrity with the precision of a master craftsman. In Transfiguration, he ensured his matchstick turned into a needle more quickly than most students but not instantaneously, as he was capable of doing. In Charms, his feather levitated smoothly but not exceptionally high. In Potions, he produced adequate but not outstanding brews, despite having knowledge of improvements and variants for every recipe assigned. Only in Defense Against the Dark Arts did Harry allow himself to appear marginally more advanced, primarily to observe Professor Quirrell more closely. Slytherin's warning about the stuttering professor had proven accurate. There was something deeply wrong with the man, beyond his apparent nervous disposition and the peculiar odor of garlic that pervaded his classroom. Harry felt it most acutely when Quirrell's back was turned, when the turban faced him directly. A cold, probing presence that seemed to emanate not from the professor himself but from something he carried, or perhaps something that carried him. The sensation reminded Harry of his scar, which occasionally prickled uncomfortably during Quirrell's classes. "Did you feel that?" he asked Blaise Zabini after a particularly unsettling dadass session where the prickling had intensified to a brief, sharp pain. "Feel what?" Blaise replied, raising an elegant eyebrow. "Nothing," Harry said quickly. "Just a draft." It was one of many small confirmations that his perceptions differed from those of his classmates. The blood ritual had enhanced his magical sensitivity, allowing him to detect energies and intentions that others missed entirely. Combined with the knowledge from Slytherin, this sensitivity made Hogwarts an open book to Harry in ways his peers couldn't begin to comprehend. One evening in late October, Harry finally found the opportunity he had been waiting for, a chance to explore the third-floor corridor that Dumbledore had declared off-limits. Using a disillusionment charm that rendered him nearly invisible, he slipped out of the Slytherin dormitory well after curfew, careful to avoid the prefect patrols whose schedules he had memorized during his first week. The corridor itself was unremarkable at first glance, dusty, poorly lit, with abandoned classrooms lining one side. But at the far end stood a heavy wooden door, locked but emanating a distinct magical signature that Harry recognized as a simple Alohomora responsive ward, hardly adequate security for something supposedly deadly. "Alohomora," he whispered, and the lock clicked open obligingly. Beyond the door lay a massive three-headed dog, thankfully asleep but no less intimidating for its current state. The creature's breath came in rumbling snores, stirring the dust on the floor with each exhale. Beneath one enormous paw, Harry glimpsed a trapdoor built into the floor, the obvious next stage of whatever security system this represented. A Cerberus guarding an underground passage. It was almost laughably mythological, like something from a children's story rather than a sophisticated magical protection. Yet its very simplicity suggested that the true security lay further below. This was merely the first, most obvious obstacle. Harry carefully backed out of the room, relocking the door behind him. He would need to research magical methods for pacifying such creatures before attempting to pass beyond the trapdoor. According to Slytherin's knowledge, music often calmed magical beasts, particularly those with connections to ancient myths. A simple flute or music box might be sufficient. But what was being protected? That was the more interesting question. Something valuable enough to store at Hogwarts, widely considered one of the safest locations in Wizarding Britain, yet requiring additional protection beyond the castle's formidable existing defenses. The answer came unexpectedly the following day, during a visit to Hagrid's hut. Harry had established a casual friendship with the gamekeeper, recognizing him as both a potential source of information and someone who had known his parents. Hagrid's tendency to speak without thinking made him particularly valuable for gathering intelligence about matters that might otherwise remain secret. "How are ya finding your classes, Harry?" Hagrid asked as he poured tea into mugs the size of soup bowls. "Settlin' in all right. Can't say I expected ya to be in Slytherin, but Dumbledore says houses don't matter so much as what's in your heart." "Classes are interesting," Harry replied, accepting the enormous mug. "Though some are more practical than others. I was hoping defense against the dark arts would be more hands-on, especially with all the dangerous things that seem to be happening lately." "Dangerous things?" Hagrid looked momentarily alarmed. "What do ya mean?" "Well, there was that break-in at Gringotts over the summer," Harry said casually, having read about it in the Daily Prophet. "And now Dumbledore's warning about the third-floor corridor. Makes you wonder if there's a connection." Hagrid's bushy eyebrows shot up. "Now Don, you go pokin' your nose where it don't belong, Harry. What's between Professor Dumbledore and Nicholas Flamel is their business." He stopped abruptly, looking horrified at his own slip. "I shouldn't ha' said that. Forget I said that. It's not fair students to know about." "Nicholas Flamel?" Harry repeated with perfectly feigned ignorance, though Slytherin's knowledge had immediately provided the connection. "Who's that?" "Never ye mind," Hagrid said gruffly. "Now, tell me about your potions classes." "Professor Snape treatin', yeah, all right." Harry allowed the conversation to move on, hiding his satisfaction at the valuable information Hagrid had inadvertently revealed. Nicholas Flamel, the famous alchemist and creator of the Philosopher's Stone, a legendary artifact capable of transforming base metals into gold and producing the elixir of life, which granted immortality. If the stone had been moved from Gringotts to Hogwarts, it explained both the break-in and the heightened security. It also explained Quirrell's strange behavior. If the defense professor was somehow connected to the attempted theft, his presence at Hogwarts might be part of a continued effort to acquire the stone. But why would a seemingly timid, stuttering academic risk everything for such a prize? Unless Quirrell wasn't acting alone. Unless he was, perhaps, under the influence of someone, or something, else entirely. The pieces began to align in Harry's mind, forming a pattern too specific to be coincidence. His scar, which hurt only in Quirrell's presence. The divided magical signature he sensed from the professor. The turban, always wrapped tightly, concealing, what? Voldemort, Harry whispered to himself that night, safely behind the privacy wards of his bed curtains. Quirrell is hosting Voldemort. It made perfect, terrible sense. The Dark Lord, reduced to less than a spirit by his failed killing curse, would need a host body to act in the physical world. The Philosopher's Stone would offer not just immortality but full restoration, a new body, perhaps, or a way to strengthen his weakened form. And what better disguise than the stuttering, apparently harmless defense professor, positioned perfectly to monitor Dumbledore and access the stone? Harry's first instinct was to take this revelation to Slytherin's portrait, to seek guidance on how to proceed. But a deeper, colder calculation stayed his hand. This situation presented not just danger but opportunity. a chance to observe the remains of the Dark Lord firsthand, to understand what he had become and, perhaps, to position himself advantageously for whatever came next. If Voldemort was seeking restoration, if he remained in some form despite his apparent defeat, then the wizarding world's comfortable assumptions about peace and safety were illusions. And illusions, as Slytherin had taught him repeatedly, could be exploited by those who recognized them for what they were. Instead of exposing Quirrell, Harry decided to watch and wait, gathering information, assessing weaknesses, and preparing for the inevitable confrontation that would come when Voldemort made his move for the stone. It was a calculated risk, but one that aligned with his longer-term objectives of understanding and eventually surpassing the power that had shaped his life so dramatically. The decision marked a significant milestone in Harry's development, the first time he had chosen to pursue his own strategy rather than immediately consulting with Slytherin. The portrait remained an invaluable resource, but Harry was beginning to trust his own judgment, his own analysis of complex magical and political situations. He was becoming, in truth as well as name, the heir of Slytherin, not merely a vessel for ancient knowledge, but its active interpreter and implementer in a world far removed from Salazar's time. As winter descended on Hogwarts, bringing swirling snow and ice-crusted windows, Harry's careful observations began to bear fruit. The pattern of relationships within Slytherin House had stabilized, with clear hierarchies emerging not just among the first years but between them and the older students. Harry had positioned himself as a quiet but respected presence, not challenging Malfoy's apparent leadership directly, but establishing himself as someone whose opinion mattered, whose approval was worth having. It was a delicate balance, maintained through careful displays of magical competence, political awareness, and selective alliances. "You're not what I expected, Potter," Draco commented one evening in the common room as they worked on a particularly challenging transfiguration essay. "Father said to watch you carefully, that you might be confused about where your loyalties should lie. But you seem to understand how things work better than most Muggle-raised wizards." "Perhaps I'm a quick learner," Harry replied with a slight smile, recognizing the tentative olive branch for what it was. Lucius Malfoy, through his son, was testing Harry's potential as an ally, or at least assessing whether he might be a threat to whatever post-Voldemort agenda the former Death Eater was pursuing. Draco nodded, his pale eyes calculating. "Father says the wizarding world is changing. That old alignments may not serve us well in the coming years. He says flexibility is the hallmark of true ambition." It was as close to a political overture as Draco could make at 11 years old, parroting his father's words without fully understanding their implications. But it confirmed what Harry had suspected: the Malfoy family, like many former Voldemort supporters, was repositioning itself for a new era, hedging its bets in case the Dark Lord never returned. "Your father sounds wise," Harry said neutrally. "The world rarely stays the same for long. Those who adapt survive, those who cling to the past, don't." The conversation shifted back to their homework, but something had changed between them, a tentative understanding that transcended their surface rivalry. Not friendship, exactly, but a mutual recognition that each might be valuable to the other in ways that extended beyond their immediate school experience. Similar subtle shifts were occurring in Harry's relationships with other key Slytherins. Theodore Nott, the quiet, observant son of another suspected Death Eater, had begun seeking Harry out for chess matches in the common room, games that inevitably evolved into abstract discussions of strategy and long-term thinking that revealed Nott's considerable intellectual depth. Blaise Zabini, whose mother was notorious for her succession of wealthy husbands who died under mysterious circumstances, treated Harry with a wary respect that seemed based not on his fame but on some qualities Zabini had identified during their shared classes and dormitory life. Most intriguing, however, was Daphne Greengrass's evolving attitude. The ice-cold pure-blood heiress had initially regarded Harry with the same detached assessment she applied to everyone. But as the term progressed, her analytical gaze had shifted, becoming more curious, more focused. She had begun sitting near him in classes, not interacting directly but observing his wand work, his answers to professors' questions, his interactions with other students. "You're hiding something, Potter," she said bluntly one afternoon as they worked together on a potions assignment, paired by Snape in what Harry suspected was an attempt to monitor him more closely. Something more than the typical secrets everyone carries. Harry looked up from the valerian roots he was preparing, his expression carefully neutral. What makes you say that? Your control, she replied, her blue eyes never leaving his face. It's too perfect. First years are emotional, reactive. Even the most disciplined purebloods raised with etiquette tutors have moments where they slip. You never do. It was a perceptive observation, one that highlighted the central challenge of Harry's facade. Perfect control was, paradoxically, a form of imperfection in someone his age. Natural behavior included occasional lapses, emotional outbursts, momentary failures of discipline. Maybe I've had more practice than most, he said, deliberately allowing a hint of bitterness to color his tone. The Dursleys weren't exactly kind to signs of emotion. Or to anything magical. Daphne's expression didn't soften, sympathy wasn't in her nature, but something in her eyes suggested reassessment. So it's a survival mechanism. Interesting. She returned to measuring powdered spine of lionfish, adding precisely the amount specified in the textbook. My family stayed neutral during the war, you know. Father says taking sides limits options. A very Slytherin perspective, Harry commented, recognizing the statement as both information sharing and a subtle declaration of independence from the more ideologically aligned pureblood families. Maybe that's why the hat put you here, Daphne said, her focus still on their potion. You understand that principle instinctively. Keeping your options open. Revealing only what serves your purpose. It was the most direct acknowledgement yet from any of his peers that they recognized the calculation behind his behavior. Rather than denying it, Harry opted for a partial truth. The Sorting Hat said I have qualities all the founders valued, he said quietly, ensuring no one else could overhear. But that my ambition and resourcefulness would serve me best in Slytherin. Daphne nodded, as though this confirmed something she had already concluded. Just be careful, Potter. Some secrets are safer kept than shared. Especially in this house. The warning, or perhaps it was advice, marked a turning point in their relationship. Not friendship, exactly, but a mutual recognition of kindred spirits, both navigating complex political waters with more awareness than their age would suggest. Similar dynamics were developing beyond Slytherin House, though with different nuances. Hermione Granger had become something of a research partner, her insatiable appetite for knowledge making her an ideal resource for gathering information without revealing Harry's true capabilities. Her social isolation within Gryffindor, a result of her intense academic focus and somewhat abrasive personality, made her particularly receptive to Harry's carefully calibrated friendship. I found something about Nicholas Flamel, she whispered excitedly during one of their study sessions in the library, sliding an enormous old book across the table. He's an alchemist, the only known maker of the Philosopher's Stone. Harry feigned surprise and interest as she explained what he already knew about the stone's properties. So that's what the dog is guarding, he mused, as though putting the pieces together for the first time. The stone must have been moved from Gringotts to Hogwarts for safekeeping. Exactly. Hermione agreed, her eyes bright with the thrill of solving a mystery. But who would try to steal it? And why? Someone who wants immortality, or unlimited gold, or both, Harry replied, watching her reaction carefully. Someone desperate enough to risk breaking into both Gringotts and Hogwarts. Hermione's expression grew serious. Someone like. You know who. But he's dead, isn't he? Is he? Harry countered softly. No body was ever found. What if he was just, diminished somehow? What if the stone could bring him back to full power? The horror that dawned on Hermione's face was genuine. We have to tell someone. Dumbledore already knows, Harry interrupted gently. Why else would the stone be here, under his protection? The best security in the wizarding world, with him personally overseeing it? Hermione hesitated, her logical mind processing this perspective. But if Dumbledore knows the stone might be targeted by you-know-who, then why? Why bring it to a school full of children? Harry finished for her. That's the real question, isn't it? He left the implication hanging between them, that perhaps Dumbledore had reasons beyond simple protection for bringing the stone to Hogwarts. Reasons that might involve using it as bait, with Harry himself potentially part of the calculation. It was a seed of doubt carefully planted, one that might sprout into useful questioning of authority if properly nurtured. As winter gave way to spring, Harry's network of information and influence continued to expand, but so did the challenges to his carefully constructed facade. Snape's scrutiny had intensified, with the potion's master finding increasingly transparent excuses to monitor Harry's activities. The Division 7 operative, whom Harry had identified as unspeakable Corvus Blackwood through careful eavesdropping, had begun placing detection charms in classrooms where Harry studied, presumably searching for unusual magical signatures. Most concerning, however, was Quirrell's increasingly erratic behavior. The defense professor appeared physically diminished, his face gaunt, his robes hanging loose on his thinning frame. The odor of garlic that surrounded him had strengthened, now accompanied by something else, a smell of decay, as though something was rotting beneath the turban. His stutter worsened in public settings but occasionally vanished entirely when he thought himself unobserved. These changes suggested escalation, Voldemort's possession taking a greater toll on his host, perhaps indicating preparation for some final move against the stone. Harry knew the confrontation was approaching, felt it with the same certainty that had guided his magical development under Slytherin's tutelage. He needed to be ready, not just to observe but potentially to intervene if the situation demanded it. The Philosopher's Stone represented power, enormous power, that could shift the balance of the wizarding world if it fell into Voldemort's hands. Whether Harry's own interests were best served by preventing or allowing such an outcome remained an open question, one that required careful analysis of multiple scenarios. "You've been avoiding our consultations," Slytherin observed one night in late April, when Harry finally made time to enlarge the portrait and discuss recent developments. "That suggests either growing independence or information you're reluctant to share." "Perhaps both." "I've been carefully monitored," Harry replied in Parseltongue, his privacy ward strengthened beyond their usual parameters. Snape and the Division 7 operative seem to be coordinating their surveillance. Finding secure moments has been challenging. It was true, though not the complete explanation for his reduced contact with the portrait. Harry had indeed been developing his own strategies, testing his ability to navigate complex situations without immediate guidance. It was a natural evolution of their relationship, one that Slytherin had encouraged in theory but perhaps hadn't expected so soon in practice. "Tell me about Quirrell," Slytherin said, his painted eyes sharp with interest. "Has your assessment changed since our last discussion?" Harry shared his observations about the defense professor's deterioration, the strengthening connection to his scar, and the intelligence he had gathered about the Philosopher's Stone. "I believe Voldemort intends to make his move soon, possibly before the end of term when security might be reduced during examinations." "And what is your intended response?" Slytherin asked, watching Harry's expression carefully. "Will you alert Dumbledore? Attempt to secure the stone yourself? Or simply observe and allow events to unfold naturally?" The question cut to the heart of Harry's evolving worldview, the balance between action and observation, between immediate intervention and long-term strategy. It was also, he recognized, a test of sorts. Slytherin was evaluating not just his decision but his reasoning process, his ability to weigh competing priorities against his ultimate objectives. "I need more information before deciding," Harry said finally. "Specifically, I need to understand what Voldemort has become, how his disembodiment has affected his magic, his mind. This may be my only opportunity to observe him in a weakened state, to identify vulnerabilities that could be exploited later." "Dangerous," Slytherin commented, though his tone suggested approval rather than warning. Direct contact with the Dark Lord, even in his diminished form, carries significant risks. His legilimency was legendary, matched only by Dumbledore's. "My occlumency shields are strong," Harry countered. "And I have no intention of revealing my full capabilities. I'll present as nothing more than a curious, perhaps foolishly brave first year who stumbled upon the truth." Slytherin's painted lips curved in a cold smile. A calculated risk, then. But potentially high yield in terms of intelligence gathered. What of the stone itself? It represents considerable power, power that might serve your own ambitions. It was a temptation Harry had already considered and analyzed from multiple angles. The Philosopher's Stone offered immortality and unlimited gold, traditional forms of power, certainly, but also obvious ones that would immediately mark the possessor as a target for every ambitious wizard in Britain. The stone is a distraction, Harry replied with certainty. Valuable, yes, but too visible, too coveted. True power comes from knowledge and its application, not from artifacts that others will endlessly seek to claim. If I took the stone, I would spend eternity defending it from those who would steal it, including, eventually, a restored Voldemort. Slytherin studied him with calculating assessment, as though seeing Harry with new eyes. You continue to surprise me, young heir. Many wizards twice your age and experience would not see beyond the stone's obvious allure. Your perspective suggests a maturity of thought I had not anticipated developing so quickly. The approval, rarely given and therefore all the more valuable, confirmed Harry's growing confidence in his own strategic thinking. He was no longer merely implementing Slytherin's guidance but developing his own approach to power and its acquisition, an approach that prioritized sustainability and discretion over immediate gains, no matter how tempting. So you will observe Voldemort, assess his current state, but not directly oppose his attempt to claim the stone. Slytherin clarified. Unless circumstances change significantly, Harry agreed. Dumbledore has clearly laid a trap, one that may be intended for me as much as for Voldemort. I see no reason to play the role he has scripted without understanding his full design. It was a cold calculation, one that prioritized information gathering over the more conventionally heroic response of rushing to protect the stone. But Harry had long since moved beyond conventional morality in his strategic thinking, guided by Slytherin's centuries of experience and his own brutal childhood with the Dursleys. The wizarding world had left him to suffer for years, had failed to protect him when he needed protection most. Why should he now rush to its defense without first understanding how such action would serve his own long-term interests? As May turned to June and final examinations approached, the tension within Hogwarts became palpable. Quirrell's deterioration accelerated, he missed meals, appeared distracted in class, and was occasionally observed talking to himself in empty corridors. Snape watched him with open suspicion, while Dumbledore's twinkling eyes seemed more calculating than ever during meals in the Great Hall. The pieces were moving into their final positions. The confrontation Harry had anticipated was approaching rapidly. And when it came, he would be ready, not as the savior the wizarding world might expect, but as the calculating heir to Slytherin's legacy, gathering information and power with the patience of a predator who understood that timing was everything. The game was reaching its first critical juncture, and Harry Potter intended to emerge from it with far more than anyone might suspect possible for a mere first-year student. Knowledge was power, after all, and knowledge of Voldemort's current state might prove the most valuable intelligence of all in the years to come. The opportunity Harry had been waiting for presented itself during the final week of term. Dumbledore was called away to an emergency meeting of the Wizengamot, information Harry gleaned from a casual conversation with Professor McGonagall while returning a library book. The headmaster's absence was precisely the opening Voldemort needed, and Harry was certain Quirrell would act quickly. That night, Harry prepared himself methodically. He strengthened his occlumency shields, ensuring they presented exactly the right balance of resistance and vulnerability, enough to make any mental probe work for access, but with carefully constructed, weak points that would reveal only what Harry wanted discovered. He reviewed the layout of obstacles likely to protect the stone, based on his observations of the professors who had presumably contributed to its defense. Most importantly, he clarified his objectives for the encounter: gather information about Voldemort's current form and capabilities, present himself as brave but ultimately unthreatening, and position himself for future interactions from a place of knowledge rather than ignorance. Going somewhere, Potter? Theodore Knott's quiet voice interrupted Harry's preparations as he was about to leave the dormitory under a disillusionment charm. Harry paused, weighing his options. Knott was observant and intelligent, denials would only raise his suspicion further. "Something's happening tonight," he said simply. "Something involving the third-floor corridor." Not raised an eyebrow. "Quirrell?" The perceptiveness of the question confirmed Harry's assessment of Nott's intelligence. "Yes. And you're going alone?" "Without alerting Snape or another professor?" Nott's tone wasn't accusatory, merely analytical, as though solving a particularly challenging puzzle. "You're either very brave or very foolish." "Perhaps both." "Perhaps," Harry acknowledged with a slight smile. "But sometimes direct observation is the only way to confirm certain theories." Nott studied him for a long moment before nodding slowly. "I'll cover for you if anyone notices your absence. But I'll expect a full account when you return, if you return." It was an unexpected alliance, albeit a tentative one. Nott was offering assistance without demanding immediate involvement, a typically Slytherin approach that respected Harry's autonomy while establishing a debt to be repaid later with information. "Thank you," Harry said simply. "If I'm not back by morning, I'll alert Snape." Nott finished for him. "Not before. We Slytherins handle our own business first, after all." With that understanding established, Harry completed his disillusionment charm and slipped out of the dormitory. The common room was nearly empty, with only a few seventh years still studying for their newts. The corridors beyond were patrolled by prefects and professors, but Harry had long since memorized their patterns, allowing him to navigate to the third floor without detection. The door to the Cerberus's chamber was already ajar when he arrived, confirmation that someone had preceded him. Soft harp music drifted from within, a charmed instrument playing continuously to keep the massive three-headed dog asleep. Harry slipped inside, noting the open trapdoor beneath the creature's massive paw. Quirrell had indeed moved on the stone, exactly as predicted. Harry approached the trapdoor cautiously, peering down into the darkness below. A distant, soft surface awaited, some kind of plant, he suspected, based on the vague outlines visible in the dim light. Without hesitation, he lowered himself into the opening and let go, falling through darkness until he landed on something that initially felt like a soft mattress but quickly began to move, tendrils wrapping around his legs. Devil's Snare. A simple enough obstacle for anyone with basic herbology knowledge. Harry remained deliberately calm, allowing his body to relax completely. The plant, sensing no resistance, gradually loosened its grip, allowing him to slip through to the floor below. The next chamber contained hundreds of flying keys and a broomstick, clearly Professor Flitwick's contribution to the defenses. The door on the opposite side was locked, requiring the correct key to proceed. Rather than mounting the broom as obviously intended, Harry studied the lock carefully, then the swirling mass of keys above. One particular key moved differently, its wing bent as though it had already been roughly handled. "Accio damaged key," Harry whispered, using a focused version of the summoning charm to avoid attracting the entire swarm. The bent-winged key zoomed into his hand, struggling briefly before he inserted it into the lock and turned it with a satisfying click. Beyond lay a giant wizard's chessboard, McGonagall's obstacle, designed to test strategic thinking. Harry could see signs of a recent game, pieces damaged and pushed aside, a clear path already created across the board. Quirrell had passed this way not long ago. The following chamber contained an unconscious troll, even larger than the one that had been let into the castle at Halloween, an incident that Harry now recognized as a likely diversion created by Quirrell to test the school's security procedures. The creature's putrid smell filled the chamber, but Harry moved past it quickly, holding his breath until he reached the next doorway. A wall of black flames blocked the entrance to what must be the final chamber, while purple flames prevented retreat. On a table stood 7 bottles of different shapes and sizes, along with a parchment containing a logical riddle. Snape's contribution was exactly what Harry would have expected from the potion's master, a puzzle that required reasoning rather than magical power. Harry solved the riddle methodically, identifying the smallest bottle as the one that would allow passage through the black flames. Only a single swallow remained, enough for one person but no more. Quirrell had indeed preceded him, but had left just enough for one more to follow. deliberate, or merely fortunate coincidence? Either way, it served Harry's purpose. He swallowed the potion in a single gulp, feeling an icy sensation spread through his body. Then, steeling himself for whatever lay ahead, he stepped through the black flames unharmed. The final chamber was large and circular, with a magnificent mirror standing in the center, the Mirror of Erist, which Harry had researched after hearing rumors of its presence in the castle earlier in the year. Before it stood Professor Quirrell, his turban removed to reveal a horrifying sight, a second face protruding from the back of his head, pale and snake-like with glaring red eyes. Voldemort. Or what remained of him? Potter, Quirrell said without turning, his voice suddenly free of its usual stutter. I wondered if you might follow me here. Professor, Harry replied, maintaining the facade of an ordinary, if brave, first year. What's happening? What's wrong with your head? Quirrell turned slowly, allowing Harry to see both faces, his own strained, exhausted expression on one side, and Voldemort's inhuman features on the other. Nothing is wrong, Potter. My master is simply sharing my body until he can claim one of his own, a process the Philosopher's Stone will greatly facilitate. Voldemort, Harry whispered, allowing appropriate fear to show in his expression while his mind worked furiously, recording every detail of the Dark Lord's current form, every nuance of the magical signature he could detect. He's here. At Hogwarts. Let me speak to him, came a high, cold voice from the second face, a voice that seemed to bypass Harry's ears and resonate directly in his mind. Face to face. Quirrell turned completely, presenting the back of his head fully. The face there was barely human, chalk-white with glaring red eyes and slits for nostrils, like a snake. It was withered, diminished, yet still radiated malevolent power that made Harry's scar burn painfully. Harry Potter, Voldemort said, his voice a dry whisper. See what I have become. Mere shadow and vapor, forced to share another's body. Unicorn blood has strengthened me these past weeks, but the stone will do so much more. It will create a new body for me. And then, perhaps, we might discuss how a mere infant managed to defeat the greatest wizard of all time. Harry allowed himself to back up a step, as if in fear, while maintaining eye contact. He could feel Voldemort's legitimacy probing at his mind, subtle but persistent, seeking entry points to his thoughts. He let the probe encounter his outer occlumency shields, presenting them as the natural mental barriers of a magically powerful child rather than trained defenses. You killed my parents, Harry said, injecting appropriate emotion into his voice. You tried to kill me. They were casualties of war, Voldemort replied dismissively. As for you, you were a threat. A prophecy spoke of one with the power to vanquish me. I simply acted to eliminate that threat before it matured. Prudent, would you not agree? Though clearly, incomplete. The casual admission was revealing. Voldemort saw the murder of an infant as nothing more than pragmatic strategy, an obstacle removed. There was no remorse, no recognition of the lives destroyed. But more importantly, he had mentioned a prophecy, a critical piece of information that Slytherin's knowledge had not included. A prophecy that apparently identified Harry as a threat to Voldemort's power. What prophecy? Harry asked, genuine curiosity momentarily overshadowing his calculated performance. Voldemort's lipless mouth curved in what might have been a smile. Dumbledore has kept you ignorant, it seems. How very like him, manipulating pieces on a chessboard without explaining the game. Perhaps I will tell you. After you help me obtain the stone. Look in the mirror, Potter. Tell me what you see. Harry approached the Mirror of Erist cautiously. He knew its properties from his research, it showed the deepest, most desperate desires of the heart. But Dumbledore had clearly modified it somehow to conceal the stone, perhaps linking its release to specific intentions or desires. As Harry stood before the mirror, he saw himself, not as he was, but as he might become. An older version of himself stood reflected, powerful and commanding, with Slytherin's locket around his neck and a silver serpent staff in his hand. Behind this future self stood shadowy figures, allies or followers, Harry couldn't tell, and at his feet lay a defeated form that might have been Voldemort himself. It was a vision of complete triumph, of power achieved and enemies vanquished. But there was more. The reflection reached into its pocket and withdrew a blood-red stone, winking knowingly as it returned the stone to its pocket. Simultaneously, Harry felt a sudden weight in his own pocket, the real stone, somehow transferred from the mirror to his possession. Dumbledore's final defense was clever indeed, only one who wanted to find the stone but not use it could retrieve it from the mirror. Harry's genuine disinterest in the stone for its own sake had allowed him to obtain it where Quirrell and Voldemort had failed. Well? Voldemort demanded impatiently. What do you see? Harry constructed a partial truth. I see myself, but older. Powerful. Standing over a defeated enemy. Voldemort's red eyes narrowed. Interesting. Your ambition betrays your Slytherin nature, Potter. Perhaps we are not so different after all. But you see nothing else? Nothing about the stone? No, Harry lied smoothly, allowing appropriate confusion to show on his face. Just, myself. Grown up. Successful. Voldemort hissed in frustration. He lies. He has the stone. Take it from him. Quirrell lunged forward with surprising speed, his hands closing around Harry's throat before he could react. The contact produced an unexpected effect. Quirrell's skin blistered and burned where it touched Harry's, causing the professor to release him with a howl of pain. My hands! Quirrell cried, staring at his smoking, blistered palms. Master, I cannot touch him. Then kill him and be done with it. Voldemort shrieked. Quirrell raised his wand, but Harry was faster. Drawing on the reflexes honed through years of training with Slytherin, he dove aside as a killing curse shattered the stone floor where he had stood. This was no longer an information-gathering exercise, it had become a fight for survival. Harry retaliated with a series of spells that would appear impressive but not impossible for a talented first year, a disarming charm, a leglocker curse, a blinding flash of light. None connected, as Quirrell shielded easily, but they created space and time for Harry to think. The burning effect of his touch was unexpected but potentially decisive. If direct contact harmed Quirrell, perhaps it would affect Voldemort as well. It was a vulnerability Harry hadn't anticipated but could exploit, though it would require getting dangerously close to his opponent. Your mother's protection, Voldemort snarled, recognizing what was happening. Her sacrifice created a shield in your very skin, one that burns this shared flesh that holds me. Clever, old magic, but it will not save you. Quirrell cast another killing curse, which Harry barely avoided. The green light struck the mirror instead, shattering it into countless glittering fragments. In the momentary distraction, Harry lunged forward, hands outstretched, and grabbed Quirrell's face directly. The effect was immediate and horrifying. Quirrell's skin cracked and blistered beneath Harry's palms, his screams echoing through the chamber. Harry maintained contact despite the agony in his scar, which felt as though it might split his head open. Through the pain, he focused his attention on Voldemort's face, memorizing every detail of the disintegrating magical connection between host and parasite. Voldemort was screaming too now, his high, cold voice mingling with Quirrell's in a terrible duet of agony. Harry could feel something tearing loose, the Dark Lord's spirit separating from his dying host, a writhing, smoke-like essence struggling to maintain cohesion. For a brief, electric moment, Harry felt Voldemort's consciousness brush directly against his own, not through legitimacy but through some deeper connection that seemed to resonate with his scar. In that fraction of a second, impressions flashed between them like lightning, pain, rage, and confusion from Voldemort, calculated assessment from Harry that he couldn't fully disguise in this direct mental contact. Then Quirrell collapsed, his body crumbling to ash beneath Harry's hands, and the smoke-like essence that was Voldemort rose up, hovering momentarily before the fading eyes of his dead host. This is not over, Potter, the disembodied spirit hissed, its voice barely audible. We will meet again, and next time, your mother's protection will not save you. The spirit surged forward, passing through Harry's body like a freezing wind, causing him to collapse in genuine pain. As consciousness faded, Harry registered the stone still in his pocket, the charred remains of Quirrell on the floor, and the certainty that he had gathered invaluable information from this encounter, information that would shape his strategy for years to come. His last thought before darkness claimed him was one of cold satisfaction. Round 1 had concluded exactly as he had hoped, with Voldemort revealing far more than he realized and Harry's own capabilities remaining largely concealed. The true game was only beginning. Harry awoke in the hospital wing, the familiar smell of medicinal potions filling his nostrils. His body ached as though he had been trampled by hippogriffs, but his mind was clear and focused, immediately cataloguing his surroundings and situation. Dumbledore sat beside his bed, blue eyes watching him with that characteristic twinkle that Harry now recognized as carefully calculated geniality masking razor-sharp assessment. "Good afternoon, Harry," the headmaster said gently. "How are you feeling?" Harry allowed his expression to shift from initial confusion to dawning memory, exactly as would be expected from an 11-year-old awakening after trauma. "Professor Dumbledore." "The stone, Quirrell was trying to steal it for Voldemort." "Calm yourself, dear boy, you are a little behind the times," Dumbledore said. "Quirrell does not have the stone." "Then, who does? Did you get there in time?" Harry asked, maintaining his facade of limited knowledge and understanding. "I arrived just after you lost consciousness," Dumbledore explained, "but it seems you had already prevented Professor Quirrell from taking the stone. As for where it is now, it has been destroyed." "That was unexpected." Harry allowed appropriate shock to show on his face. "Destroyed? But what about Nicholas Flamel? Won't he die?" "You know about Nicholas?" Dumbledore looked pleased. "You did do the thing properly, didn't you?" "Well, Nicholas and I have had a little chat, and agreed it's all for the best." Dumbledore went on to explain that Flamel had enough elixir stored to set his affairs in order before accepting death as the next great adventure. It was a surprisingly cavalier attitude toward the end of a 600-year life, but Harry sensed there was more to the story than Dumbledore was revealing. Perhaps the stone hadn't been destroyed at all, merely hidden more securely. Or perhaps Flamel had additional stones that the wizarding world didn't know about. "Sir," Harry said after a moment, "there are some things I'd like to know, if you can tell me, things about Voldemort, and my parents." "I shall answer your questions unless I have a very good reason not to," Dumbledore replied, his expression becoming more serious. "And in that case, I beg you to forgive me. I shall not, of course, lie." It was a carefully worded promise, one that allowed for omissions and half-truths while maintaining the appearance of honesty. Harry recognized the political craftsmanship behind it, even as he prepared his own carefully chosen questions. "Voldemort said he tried to kill me because of a prophecy, that I was a threat to him. What did he mean?" A shadow passed over Dumbledore's face, brief but unmistakable. "Ah. I wondered if he might have mentioned that. A prophecy was indeed made shortly before your birth that concerned Voldemort and yourself. He knew only part of it, however, when he acted against you and your parents." "What did it say?" Harry pressed, sensing that he was approaching information Dumbledore was reluctant to share. "The full contents are not something I intend to reveal today," Dumbledore said gently but firmly. "When you are older, when you are ready, I promise you will know. For now, please trust that I do not withhold this information out of a desire to control you, but out of concern for the burden such knowledge would place on shoulders still too young to bear it." It was a masterful deflection, acknowledging the prophecy's existence while refusing to share its contents, all wrapped in the language of protection and appropriate timing. Harry could have pressed further, but doing so would reveal a determination and focus atypical for his presumed level of development. Instead, he shifted to his next question. "Why couldn't Quirrell touch me? Voldemort said something about my mother's protection." This, Dumbledore seemed more willing to discuss. He explained about Lily Potter's sacrifice, how her decision to die for Harry had created a protection in his very skin against Voldemort. "While you can still call home the place where your mother's blood dwells, there you cannot be touched or harmed by Voldemort. He shed her blood, but it lives on in you and her sister. Her blood became your refuge. You need return there only once a year, but as long as you can still call it home, there he cannot hurt you." The explanation was illuminating. It explained both why Harry had been placed with the Dursleys and why he needed to return there each summer. It was a powerful piece of old magic, one that Slytherin's knowledge confirmed as legitimate, if somewhat simplified in Dumbledore's explanation. Their conversation continued, with Harry carefully balancing his questions between what a normal child would ask and what information he genuinely needed. Throughout, he maintained his occlumency shields, presenting precisely the mental state Dumbledore would expect: confusion, residual fear, determination, and nascent courage. When Dumbledore finally left, promising that friends could visit soon, Harry allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. The encounter with Voldemort had yielded far more information than he had anticipated, about the Dark Lord's current form, about the prophecy that linked them, about Dumbledore's own strategies and manipulations. Most importantly, it had confirmed Harry's suspicion that he was being groomed for some future confrontation with Voldemort, positioned as a piece on Dumbledore's chessboard, a weapon being shaped for eventual deployment against a specific threat. The headmaster's careful management of information, his strategic placement of the stone where Harry might find it, his apparent orchestration of a confrontation between Harry and Voldemort, all pointed to a long-term plan that stretched years into the future. A plan that Harry had no intention of following blindly. The remaining days at Hogwarts passed quickly. Harry received visits from various friends and allies, Hermione bringing homework and tearful declarations about the importance of friendship, Ron awkwardly offering support despite their house differences, and several Slytherins including Draco, Blaise, and Theodore, who came ostensibly to ensure their housemate was recovering but clearly to gather intelligence about what had actually occurred. The official story is that Quirrell tried to steal something valuable and you stumbled upon him, Theodore said quietly during one such visit. Dumbledore arrived just in time to save you from serious harm. Very neat, very tidy, and very incomplete, I suspect. Harry offered a slight smile. The truth is rarely as simple as official stories suggest. And rarely as dramatic as rumors imply, Blaise added, his dark eyes shrewd. Some are saying you dueled Quirrell to a standstill. Others claim you discovered he was possessed by the Dark Lord himself. Ridiculous, Draco scoffed, though his expression remained calculating. The Dark Lord is gone. Everyone knows that. Harry said nothing, allowing his silence to speak volumes. Let them wonder, let them theorize. The uncertainty would only enhance his position within Slytherin House, the first year who faced unknown dangers and returned, changed but unbroken. Most surprising was a brief, private visit from Daphne Greengrass on his last evening in the hospital wing. She brought no get-well gifts, offered no sympathy, asked no questions about what had happened. Instead, she placed a small, ancient-looking book on his bedside table. "Summer reading," she said simply. "My family's library contains some volumes you won't find at Hogwarts or in Diagon Alley. This one seemed relevant to your interests." Harry examined the book, a slim, leather-bound volume titled Occlumency, The Fortress Within, in faded silver lettering. The implications were clear. Daphne had recognized his mental shields, understood their significance, and was offering assistance in strengthening them further. "Thank you," he said, matching her restraint. "This looks educational." Daphne nodded, the ghost of a smile touching her lips. "Knowledge is survival, Potter. Remember that when you return to those muggles of yours." With that, she turned and left, her posture as perfect as always. The end-of-year feast featured Slytherin winning the House Cup, despite Gryffindor's late surge in points. Harry received a hero's welcome in the common room afterward, his stock among his housemates higher than ever. Even those who had initially doubted his placement in Slytherin now acknowledged that he had demonstrated both cunning and ambition in his encounter with Quirrell, though few knew the full extent of what had occurred. On the train ride home, Harry shared a compartment with a carefully selected group: Blaise, Theodore, and Daphne from Slytherin, with Hermione joining them briefly to exchange summer correspondence information. The conversation remained light, touching on summer plans and next year's classes, but beneath the surface ran currents of assessment and calculation as alliances began to solidify. As the Hogwarts Express pulled into platform 9 3/4, Harry prepared himself for the return to Privet Drive. The Dursleys would be waiting, unaware of how significantly their unwanted charge had changed during his first year at Hogwarts. They still saw him as the burden they had been forced to raise, not as the heir to ancient magical knowledge, not as the survivor of a direct encounter with the most feared dark wizard of the age. Their ignorance would serve his purposes, as it had for years. The blood protection required him to call Privet Drive home for a portion of each year, but it did not require him to remain passive or powerless while there. Indeed, the summer ahead held significant potential for advancement. With Slytherin's portrait as his guide and the knowledge gained from his confrontation with Voldemort, Harry planned to accelerate certain aspects of his magical development, particularly those that would prepare him for whatever the prophecy might eventually reveal about his connection to the Dark Lord. "Try not to terrorize those muggles too much," Blaise said with a smirk as they prepared to disembark. "We need you back in one piece next term." "The Dursleys are the least of my concerns," Harry replied with a cold smile that made his companions exchange glances. "This summer will be productive." As he crossed the barrier back into the Muggle world, Harry spotted the Dursleys waiting with matching expressions of distaste. Vernon's face was already purpling at the sight of Harry's trunk and the obvious magical nature of his school supplies. "Boy," Vernon grunted by way of greeting. "Come on then, we haven't got all day." Harry followed obediently, maintaining his facade of ordinary 11-year-old wizard returning reluctantly to his Muggle relatives. Inside, however, his mind was already racing ahead, planning the rituals and practices that would fill his summer nights in the chamber beneath the garden shed. Voldemort was still out there, weakened but not destroyed. The prophecy tied them together in ways Harry did not yet fully understand. And Dumbledore was orchestrating events from behind the scenes, positioning his pieces for some future confrontation. But Harry Potter was no one's pawn, not anymore. He was the heir of Slytherin, with knowledge and power beyond what any of them suspected. And when the next round of this elaborate game began, he would be ready with moves none of them could anticipate. The coldest Dark Lord in history was taking shape, one calculated step at a time. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.